Section 1 of The Natural History, Volume 6. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Colleen McMahon. The Natural History, Volume 6, by Pliny the Elder. Translated by John Bostock and Henry Thomas Riley. Section 1. Book 26, Chapters 1 to 21. Book 26, a continuation of the remedies derived from plants, classified according to particular diseases. Chapter 1, New Forms of Disease. The face of man has recently been sensible of new forms of disease, unknown in ancient times, not only to Italy, but to almost the whole of Europe. Still, however, they have not as yet extended to the whole of Italy, nor have they made any very great inroads in Illyricum, Gaul, or Spain, or indeed any other parts to so great an extent as in Rome and its environs. Though unattended with pain, and not dangerous to life, these diseases are of so loathsome a nature that any form of death would be preferable to them. Chapter 2. The Nature of Lichen. The most insupportable of all these diseases is the one which, after its Greek appellation, is known to us as lichen. In consequence, however, of its generally making its first appearance at the chin, the Latins, by way of joke originally, so prone are mankind to make a jest of the misfortunes of others, gave it the name of mentagra, an appellation which has since become established in general use. In many cases, however, this disease spreads over the interior of the mouth and takes possession of the whole face, with the sole exception of the eyes, after which it passes downwards to the neck, breast, and hands, covering them with foul furfuraceous eruptions. Chapter 3. At what period lichen first made its appearance in Italy. This curse was unknown to the ancients, and in the times of our fathers even, having first entered Italy in the middle of the reign of the Emperor Tiberius Claudius Caesar, where it was introduced from Asia, in which country it had lately made its appearance, by a member of the equestrian order at Rome, a native of Perusium, secretary to the quaestor. The disease, however, did not attack either females or slaves, nor yet the lower orders, or indeed the middle classes, but only the nobles, being communicated even by the momentary contact requisite for the act of salutation. Many of those who persevered in undergoing a course of remedial treatment, though cured of the disease, retained scars upon the body more hideous even than the malady itself, it being treated with cauteries, as it was certain to break out afresh unless means were adopted for burning it out of the body by cauterizing to the very bone. Upon this occasion, several physicians repaired to Rome from Egypt, that fruitful parent of maladies of this nature, men who devoted themselves solely to this branch of medical practice, and very considerable were the profits they made. At all events, it is a well-known fact that Manilius Cornutus, a personage of praetorian rank and legatus of the province of Aquitania, expended no less a sum than 200,000 sesterces upon his cure. It is much more frequently, on the other hand, that we hear of new forms of diseases attacking the lower orders, a singular fact, and one quite unequaled for the marvelous phenomena which sometimes attend these outbreaks. Thus, for instance, we find an epidemic suddenly making its appearance in a certain country, and then confining itself, as though it had made its election so to do, to certain parts of the body, certain ages, and even certain pursuits in life. In the same way, too, while one class of diseases attacks the young, another confines itself to adults. While one malady extends itself only to the higher classes, another is felt exclusively by the poor. Chapter 4. Carbuncle. We find it stated in the Annals that it was in the censorship of L. Paulus and Q. Marcius that carbuncle was first introduced into Italy, a malady which till then had confined itself solely to the province of Gallia Narbonensis. In the year in which I am writing these lines, 2 persons of consular rank have died of this disease, Iulius Rufus and Q. Licanius Bassus, the former in consequence of an incision unskilfully made by his medical attendants, the latter through a wound upon the thumb of the left hand, by pricking a carbuncle with a needle. a wound so small originally as to be hardly perceptible. This disease makes its appearance in the more hidden parts of the human body, and mostly beneath the tongue. It originally has the form of a hard red pimple, with a blackish head mostly, though sometimes of a livid color. It produces tension of the flesh, but unattended with swelling, pain, or any itching sensation. Indeed, the only symptom that accompanies it is a confirmed drowsiness, which overpowers the patient and carries him off in the course of 3 days. Sometimes, however, it is accompanied with shuddering and small pustules about the sore, and occasionally, though but rarely, with fever. When these symptoms extend to the fauces and esophagus, death ensues with the greatest rapidity. Chapter 5. Elephantiasis. We have already stated that elephantiasis was unknown in Italy before the time of Pompeius Magnus. This malady, too, like those already mentioned, mostly makes its first appearance in the face. In its primary form, it bears a considerable resemblance to a small lentil upon the nose. The skin gradually dries up all over the body, is marked with spots of various colors, and presents an unequal surface, being thick in one place, thin in another, indurated every here and there, and covered with a sort of rough scab. At a later period, the skin assumes a black hue, and compresses the flesh upon the bones, the fingers and toes becoming swollen. This disease was originally peculiar to Egypt. Whenever it attacked the kings of that country, it was attended with peculiarly fatal effects to the people, it being the practice to temper their sitting baths with human blood for the treatment of the disease. As for Italy, however, its career was very soon cut short. The same was the case, too, with the disease known as gemursa to the ancients, a malady which made its appearance between the toes, and the very name of which is now buried in oblivion. Chapter 6. Colic. It is a remarkable fact that some diseases should disappear from among us, while others again should continue to prevail. Colic, for example. It was only in the reign of Tiberius Caesar that this malady made its appearance in Italy, the emperor himself being the first to be attacked by it, a circumstance which produced considerable mystification throughout the city when it read the edict issued by that prince excusing his inattention to public business on the ground of his being laid up with the disease, the very name of which was till then unknown. To what cause are we to attribute these various diseases? Or how is it that we have thus incurred the anger of the gods? Was it deemed too little for man to be exposed to fixed and determinate classes of maladies, already more than 300 in number, that he must have new forms of disease to alarm him as well? And then, in addition to all these, not less in number are the troubles and misfortunes which man brings upon himself. The remedies which I am here describing are those which were universally employed in ancient times, nature herself, so to say, making up the medicines. Indeed, for a long time these were the only medicines employed. Hippocrates, it is well known, was the first to compile a code of medical precepts, a thing which he did with the greatest perspicuity, as his treatises, we find, are replete with information upon the various plants. No less is the information which we gain from the works of Diocles of Carystus, second only in reputation, as well as date, to Hippocrates. The same, too, with reference to the works of Praxagoras, Chrysippus, and, at a later period, Erasistratus of Kos. Herophilus, too, though himself the founder of a more refined system of medicine, was extremely profuse of his commendations of the use of simples. At a later period, however, experience, our most efficient instructor in all things, medicine in particular, gradually began to be lost sight of in mere words and verbiage, it being found, in fact, much more agreeable to sit in schools and to listen to the talk of a professor than to go a-simpling in the deserts, and to be searching for this plant or that at all the various seasons of the year. Chapter 7. The New System of Medicine. Asclepiedes the Physician. Still, however, the ancient theories remained unshaken, based as they were upon the still existing grounds of universally acknowledged experience, until in the time of Pompeius Magnus, Asclepiedes, a professor of rhetoric, who considered himself not sufficiently repaid by that pursuit, and whose readiness and sagacity rendered him better adapted for any other than forensic practice, suddenly turned his attention to the medical art. Having never practiced medicine, and being totally unacquainted with the nature of remedies, a knowledge only to be acquired by personal examination and actual experience, as a matter of course he was obliged to renounce all previously established theories, and to trust rather to his flowing periods and his well-studied discourses for gaining an influence upon the minds of his audience. Reducing the whole art of medicine to an estimation solely of primary causes, he made it nothing but a merely conjectural art, and established it as his creed that there are 5 great principles of treatment for all diseases in common: diet, use or non-use of wine, frictions, exercise on foot, and exercise in a carriage or on horseback. As everyone perceived that each of these methods of treatment lay quite within his own reach, all, of course, with the greatest readiness gave their assent, willing as they were to believe that to be true which was so easy of acquisition, and hence it was that he attracted nearly all the world about him, as though he had been sent among mankind on a special mission from heaven. Chapter 8. The changes effected by Asclepiedes in the practice of medicine. In addition to this, he had a wonderful tact in gaining the full confidence of his patients. Sometimes he would make them a promise of wine, and then seize the opportune moment for administering it, while on other occasions, again, he would prescribe cold water. Indeed, as Herophilus, among the ancients, had been the first to inquire into the primary causes of disease, and Cleophantus had brought into notice the treatment of diseases by wine, so did Asclepiedes, as we learn from M. Varro, prefer to be indebted for his surname and repute to the extensive use made by him of cold water as a remedy. He employed also various other soothing remedies for his patients. Thus, for instance, it was he that introduced swinging beds, the motion of which might either lull the malady or induce sleep, as deemed desirable. It was he, too, that brought baths into such general use, a method of treatment that was adopted with the greatest avidity, in addition to numerous other modes of treatment of a pleasant and soothing nature. By these means he acquired a great professional reputation, and a no less extended fame, which was very considerably enhanced by the following incident. Meeting the funeral procession of a person unknown to him, he ordered the body to be removed from the funeral pile and carried home, and was thus the means of saving his life. This circumstance I am the more desirous to mention, that it may not be imagined that it was on slight grounds only that so extensive a revolution was effected in the medical art. There is, however, one thing, and one thing only, at which we have any ground for indignation: the fact that a single individual, and he belonging to the most frivolous nation in the world, a man born in utter indigence, should all on a sudden, and that too for the sole purpose of increasing his income, give a new code of medical laws to mankind. Laws, however, be it remembered, which have been annulled by numerous authorities since his day. The success of Asclepiedes was considerably promoted by many of the usages of ancient medicine, repulsive in their nature, and attended with far too much anxiety. Thus, for instance, it was the practice to cover up the patient with vast numbers of clothes, and to adopt every possible method of promoting the perspiration, to order the body to be roasted before a fire, or else to be continually sending the patient on a search for sunshine, a thing hardly to be found in a showery climate like that of this city of ours, or rather, so to say, of the whole of Italy, so prolific as it is of fogs and rain. It was to remedy these inconveniences that he introduced the use of hanging baths, an invention that was found grateful to invalids in the very highest degree. In addition to this, he modified the tortures which had hitherto attended the treatment of certain maladies, as in Quincy, for instance, the cure of which before his time had been usually effected by the introduction of an instrument into the throat. He condemned, and with good reason, the indiscriminate use of emetics, which till then had been resorted to in a most extraordinary degree. He disapproved also of the practice of administering internally potions that are naturally injurious to the stomach, a thing that may truthfully be pronounced of the greater part of them. Indeed, it will be as well to take an early opportunity of stating what are the medicaments which act beneficially upon the stomach. Chapter 9. remarks in dispraise of the practices of magic. But above all things, it was the follies of magic, more particularly, that contributed so essentially to his success, follies which had been carried to such a pitch as to destroy all confidence in the remedial virtues of plants. Thus, for instance, it was stoutly maintained that by the agency of the plant Epis, rivers and standing waters could be dried up, and that by the very touch all bars and doors might be opened. That if the plant Achamensis were thrown into the ranks of the enemy, it would be certain to create a panic and put them to flight. That lattice was given by the Persian kings to their ambassadors to ensure them an abundant supply of everything wherever they may happen to be, with numerous other reveries of a similar nature. Where, I should like to know, were all these plants when the Cimbri and Teutons brought upon us the horrors of warfare with their terrific yells? Or when Lucullus defeated, with a few legions, so many kings who ruled over the Magi? Why is it, too, that the Roman generals, who have always made it their first care in warfare to make provision for the victualling of their troops? And how was it that at Pharsalia the troops of Caesar were suffering from famine, if an abundance of everything could have been ensured by the fortunate possession of a single plant? Would it not have been better, too, for Scipio Aemilianus to have opened the gates of Carthage by touching them with an herb, than to have taken so many years to batter down its bulwarks with his engines of war? Turning to the present moment, let them, by the agency of the herb Merois, dry up the Pomptine marshes, if they can, and by these means restore so much territory to the regions of Italy in the neighborhood of our city. In the works, too, of Democritus, already mentioned, we find a recipe for the composition of a medicament which will ensure the procreation of issue, both sure to be good and fortunate. What king of Persia, pray, ever obtained that blessing? It really would be a marvelous fact that human credulity, taking its rise originally in the very soundest of notions, should have ultimately arrived at such a pitch as this, if the mind of man understood, under any circumstances, how to keep within the bounds of moderation. And if the very system of medicine thus introduced by Asclepiedes had not been carried to a greater pitch of extravagance than the follies of magic even, an assertion which I shall prove on a more appropriate occasion. Such, however, is the natural constitution of the human mind, that, be the circumstances what they may, commencing with what is necessary, it speedily arrives at the point of launching out in excess. We will now resume our account of the medicinal properties of the plants mentioned in the preceding book, adding to our description such others as the necessities of the case may seem to require. Chapter 10. Lichen, 5 Remedies. As to the treatment of lichen, so noisome a disease as it is, we shall here give a number of additional remedies for it, gathered from all quarters, although those already described are by no means few in number. For the cure of lichen, plantago is used, pounded, cinquefoil also, root of albucus in combination with vinegar, the young shoots of the fig tree boiled in vinegar, or roots of marshmallow boiled down to 1/4 with glue and vinegar. The sores are rubbed also with pumice, and then fomented with root of rumex bruised in vinegar, or with scum of viscus kneaded up with lime. A decoction, too, of Tithimalus with resin is highly esteemed for the same purpose. But to all these remedies, the plant known as lichen, from its efficacy as a cure, is held in preference. It is found growing among rocks and has a single broad leaf near the root, and a single long stem with small leaves hanging from it. This plant has the property also of effacing brand marks, being beaten up with honey for that purpose. There is another kind of lichen also, which adheres entirely to rocks, like moss, and which is equally used as a topical application. The juice of it, dropped into wounds or applied to abscesses, has the property of arresting hemorrhage. Mixed with honey, it is curative of jaundice, the face and tongue being rubbed with it. Under this mode of treatment, the patient is recommended to wash in salt water, to anoint himself with oil of almonds, and to abstain from garden vegetables. For the cure of lichen, root of thapsia is also used, bruised in honey. Chapter 11. Quincy. For the treatment of quinsy, we find argemonia recommended in wine, a decoction of hyssop boiled with figs used as a gargle, Pseudo-Dictamnon with an equal proportion of sea calf's rennet. Proserpinica beaten up in the pickle of the mena and oil, or else placed beneath the tongue, as also juice of cinquefoil, taken in doses of 3 cyathae. Used as a gargle, juice of cinquefoil is good for the cure of all affections of the fauces. Verbascum, too, taken in wine, is particularly useful for diseases of the tonsillary glands. Chapter 12. Scrofula. For the cure of scrofula, plantago is employed, cheladonia mixed with honey and axle grease, cinquefoil, and the root of persillata, this last being applied topically and covered with the leaf of the plant, artemisia also, and an infusion of the root of mandragora in water. The large-leafed sideritis, cleft by the left hand with a nail, is worn attached as an amulet. But after the cure has been effected, due care must be taken to preserve the plant, in order that it may not be set again, to promote the wicked designs of the herbalists, and so cause the disease to break out afresh, as sometimes happens in the cases already mentioned, and others which I find stated in reference to persons cured by the agency of artemisia or plantago. Damascenium, also known as alkea, is gathered at the summer solstice and applied with rainwater, the leaves being beaten up or the root pounded with axle grease, so as to admit, when applied, of being covered with a leaf of the plant. The same plan is adopted also for the cure of all pains in the neck and tumors on all parts of the body. Chapter 13. The plant called Bellis, 2 remedies. Bellis is the name of a plant that grows in the fields with a white flower somewhat inclining to red. If this is applied with artemisia, it is said the remedy is still more efficacious. Chapter 14. The Conjuredum. The Conjuredum, too, is a plant with a red blossom, which flowers at the summer solstice. Suspended from the neck, it arrests scrofula, they say, the same being the case also with vervain in combination with plantago. For the cure of all diseases of the fingers, hangnails in particular, cinquefoil is used. Chapter 15. Cough. Of all diseases of the chest, cough is the one that is the most oppressive. For the cure of this malady, root of pinaces in sweet wine is used, and in cases where it is attended with spitting of blood, juice of henbane. Henbane, too, used as a fumigation, is good for cough, and the same with scordotus, mixed with nasturtium and dry resin, beaten up with honey. Employed by itself also, scordotus facilitates expectoration, a property which is equally possessed by the greater centauri, even where the patient is troubled with spitting of blood, for which last juice of plantago is very beneficial. Betony, taken in doses of 3 oboli in water, is useful for purulent or bloody expectorations. Root also of the persillata, in doses of 1 drachma, taken with 11 pine nuts, and juice of Pseudo-Dictamnon. For pains in the chest, acheron is remarkably useful. Hence it is that it is so much used an ingredient in antidotes. For cough, daucus and the plant Cythicae are much employed, this last being good, in fact, for all affections of the chest, coughs, and purulent expectorations, taken in doses of 3 oboli with the same proportion of raisin wine. The verbascum, too, with a flower like gold, is similarly employed. This last named plant is so remarkably energetic that an infusion of it, administered in their drink, will relieve beasts of burden, not only when troubled with cough, but when broken-winded even, a property which I find attributed to gentian also. Root of cacalia, chewed or steeped in wine, is good for cough, as well as all affections of the throat. 5 sprigs of hyssop, with 2 of rue and 3 figs, act detergently upon the thoracic organs and allay cough. Chapter 16. Bachchan, otherwise known as archeon, cameluce, or tussilago, 3 remedies. Bachchan is also known as tussilago. There are 2 kinds of it. Wherever it is found growing wild, it is generally thought that there is a spring of water below, and it is looked upon as a sure sign that such is the case by persons in search of water. The leaves are somewhat larger than those of ivy, and are some 5 or 7 in number, of a whitish hue beneath, and a pale green on the upper surface. The plant is destitute of stem, blossom, and seed, and the root is very diminutive. Some persons are of opinion that this Bachchan is identical with the Archaeon, known as the Camelucci. The smoke of this plant in a dry state, inhaled by the aid of a reed and swallowed, is curative, they say, of chronic cough. It is necessary, however, at each inhalation to take a draught of raisin wine. Chapter 17. The Bachchan, known also as salvia, for remedies. There is another Bachchan also, known to some persons as salvia, and bearing a strong resemblance to verbascum. This plant is triturated, and the juice strained off and taken warm for cough, and for pains in the side. It is considered very beneficial also for the stings of scorpions and sea dragons. It is a good plan, too, to rub the body with this juice, mixed with oil, as a preservative against the stings of serpents. A bunch of hyssop is sometimes boiled down with 1/4 pound of honey for the cure of cough. Chapter 18. Affections of the side, chest, and stomach. For the cure of pains in the side and chest, verbascum is used in water with rue. Powdered betony is also taken in warm water. Juice of scordotus is used as a stomachic. Centauri also. Gentian taken in water, and plantago, either eaten with the food or mixed with lentils or a pottage of alica. Betony, which is in general prejudicial to the stomach, is remedial for some stomachic affections, taken in drink or chewed, the leaves being used for the purpose. In a similar manner, too, aristolochia is taken in drink, or dried agaric is chewed, a draught of undiluted wine being taken every now and then. Nymphea heraclea is also applied topically in these cases, and juice of Pseudo-Dictamnon. For burning pains in the stomach, Cilion is applied, or else cotyledon beaten up with polenta, or izuum. Chapter 19. Molon or Cyron amomum. Molon is a plant with a striated stem, a soft diminutive leaf, and a root 4 fingers in length, at the extremity of which there is a head, like that of garlic. By some persons it is known as Cyron. Taken in wine, it is curative of affections of the stomach and of hardness of breathing. For similar purposes, the greater centauri is used in an electuary. Juice also of plantago, or else the plant itself, eaten with the food, pounded betony in the proportion of 1 pound to 1/2 ounce of Attic honey, taken daily in warm water, and aristolochia or agaric taken in doses of 3 aboli in warm water or ass's milk. For hardness of breathing, an infusion of sisanthemos is taken in drink, and for the same complaint, as also for asthma, hyssop. For pains in the liver, chest, and side, if unattended with fever, juice of Pseudo-Dictamnon is used. For spitting of blood, agaric is employed in doses of 1 victoriatus, bruised and administered in 5 sciathai of honeyed wine. Amomum, too, is equally useful for that purpose. For liver diseases, in particular, teucria is taken fresh, in doses of 4 drachmae to 1 hemina of oxycrate, or else betony, in the proportion of 1 drachma to 3 sciathai of warm water. For diseases of the heart, betony is recommended, in doses of 1 drachma to 2 sciathai of cold water. Juice of cinquefoil is remedial for diseases of the liver and lungs, and for spitting of blood, as well as all internal affections of the blood. The 2 varieties of anagallis are wonderfully efficacious for liver complaints. Patients who eat the plant called capnos discharge the bile by urine. Acheron is also remedial for diseases of the liver, and Daucus is useful for the thorax and the pectoral organs. Chapter 20. The ephedra or anabasis, 3 remedies. The ephedra, by some persons called anabasis, mostly grows in localities exposed to the wind. It climbs the trunks of trees and hangs down from the branches, is destitute of leaves, but has numerous suckers, jointed like a bulrush. The root is of a pale color. This plant is given, pounded, in astringent red wine, for cough, asthma, and gripings in the bowels. It is administered also in the form of a pottage, to which some wine should be added. For these complaints, gentian is also used, being steeped in water the day before, and then pounded and given in doses of 1 denarius in 3 sciathai of wine. Chapter 21. Geum, 3 remedies. Geum is a plant with thin diminutive roots, black and aromatic. It is curative not only of pains in the chest and sides, but is useful also for dispelling crudities owing to its agreeable flavor. Vervain, too, is good for all affections of the viscera, and for diseases of the sides, lungs, liver, and thorax. But one invaluable remedy for diseases of the lungs, and for cases of incipient phthisis, is the root of consiligo, a plant only very recently discovered, as already mentioned. It is a most efficient remedy also for pulmonary diseases in swine and cattle, even though only passed through the ear of the animal. When used, it should be taken in water and kept for a considerable time in the mouth beneath the tongue. Whether the part of this plant which grows above ground is useful or not for any purpose is at present unknown. Plantago, eaten with the food, betony, taken in drink, and agaric, taken in the way prescribed for cough, are useful, all of them, for disease.
Section 2 of The Natural History, Volume 6. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Gillian Hendry. The Natural History, Volume 6 by Pliny the Elder. Translated by John Bostock and Henry Thomas Riley. Section 2, Book 26, Chapters 22 to 48. Chapter 22, Trypolium, 3 Remedies. Trypolium is a plant found growing upon cliffs on the seashore, against which the waves break, springing up, so to say, neither upon dry land nor in the sea. The leaves are like those of Isatis, only thicker. The stem is a palm in height, and divided at the extremity, and the root white, thick, and odoriferous, with a warm flavour. It is recommended for diseases of the liver, boiled with spelt. This plant is thought by some to be identical with Polium, of which we have already spoken in the appropriate place. Chapter 23. The Gromphena. Gromphena is the name of a plant, the stem of which is covered with leaves of a green and rose colour, arranged alternately. The leaves of it are administered in oxycrate in cases of spitting of blood. Chapter 24. The Melandrum, 2 Remedies. For diseases of the liver, the Melandrum is prescribed, a plant which grows in meadows and cornfields, with a white odoriferous flower. The stem is diminutive and is beaten up in old wine. Chapter 25. Chalcetum, 2 Remedies. Molimonium, 1 remedy. Chalcetum also is the name of a plant which is pounded with grape husks and applied topically for the cure of liver complaints. Root of betony acts as a gentle emetic, taken in the same way as hellebore, in doses of 4 drachmae in raisin wine or honeyed wine. Hyssop too is beaten up with honey for similar purposes, but it is more efficacious if nasturtium or irio is taken first. Molimonium is used as an emetic, being taken in doses of 1 denarius. The same too with silybum. Both of these plants have a milky juice which thickens like gum and is taken with honey in the proportions above mentioned, being particularly good for carrying off bile. On the other hand, vomiting is arrested by the use of wild cumin or powdered betony, taken in water. Crudities and distaste for food are dispelled and the digestion promoted by employing docus, powdered betony taken in hydromel, or else plantago boiled like greens. Hiccup is arrested by taking hemionium or aristolochia, and asthma by the use of climinus. For pleurisy and peripneumony, the greater centaury is used, or else hyssop taken in drink. Juice of Pseudo-Dictamnon is also good for pleurisy. Chapter 26. Halus, or Cotonia, 5 Remedies. The plant halus, by the people of Gaul called sil, and by the Veneti Cotonia, is curative of pains in the side, affections of the kidneys, ruptures, and convulsions. It resembles Cunula bubula in appearance, and the tops of it are like those of thyme. It is of a sweet flavour and allays thirst. The roots of it are sometimes white, sometimes black. Chapter 27. The Chamaerops, 1 remedy. The Stochas, 1 remedy. The Chamaerops, also, is similarly efficacious for pains in the side. It is a plant with leaves like those of myrtle, arranged in pairs around the stem, the heads of it resembling those of the Greek rose. It is taken in wine. Agaric, administered in drink in the same manner as for cough, assuages sciatica and pains in the vertebra. The same too with powdered stochas or betony, taken in hydromel. Chapter 28. Remedies for diseases of the belly. But it is the belly, for the gratification of which the greater part of mankind exist, that causes the most suffering to man. Thus, for instance, at one time it will not allow the aliments to pass, while at another it is unable to retain them. Sometimes again it either cannot receive the food, or if it can, cannot digest it. Indeed, such are the excesses practised at the present day, that it is through his aliment more than anything else that man hastens his end. This receptacle, more troublesome to us than any other part of the body, is ever craving, like some importunate creditor, and makes its calls repeatedly in the day. It is for its sake, more particularly, that avarice is so insatiate, for its sake that luxury is so refined, for its sake that men voyage to the shores even of the Phasis, for its sake that the very depths of the ocean are ransacked. And yet, with all this, no one ever gives a thought how abject is the condition of this part of our body, how disgusting the results of its actions upon what it has received. No wonder, then, that the belly should have to be indebted to the aid of medicine in the very highest degree. Scordotis, fresh gathered and beaten up in doses of 1 drachma with wine, arrests flux of the bowels, an effect equally produced by a decoction of it taken in drink. Polymonia, too, is given in wine for dysentery, or 2 fingers' length of root of verbascum in water, seed of Nymphea heraclea in wine, the upper root of Ziphion in doses of 1 drachma in vinegar, seed of Plantago beaten up in wine, Plantago itself boiled in vinegar, or else a potage of alica mixed with the juice of the plant, Plantago boiled with lentils, Plantago dried and powdered and sprinkled in drink with parched poppies pounded. Juice of Plantago used as an injection or taken in drink, or betony taken in wine heated with a red-hot iron. For colic affections, betony is taken in astringent wine, or Iberus is applied topically, as already stated. For tenesmus, root of Nymphea heraclea is taken in wine, or else psyllion in water, or a decoction of root of acaron. Juice of isoum arrests diarrhea and dysentery, and expels round tapeworm. Root of symphytum, taken in wine, arrests diarrhea and dysentery, and docus has a similar effect. Leaves of isoum, beaten up in wine, and dried alcea, powdered and taken in wine, are curative of griping pains in the bowels. Chapter 29. The Astragalus, 6 remedies. Astragalus is the name of a plant which has long leaves with numerous incisions and running aslant near the root. The stems are 3 or 4 in number and covered with leaves. The flower is like that of the hyacinth, and the roots are red, hairy, matted, and extremely hard. It grows on stony localities, equally exposed to the sun and to falls of snow, those in the vicinity of Phineus, in Arcadia, for instance. Its properties are highly astringent. The root of it, taken in wine, arrests looseness of the bowels, having the additional effect of throwing downward the aqueous humours, and so acting as a diuretic, a property in fact which belongs to most substances which act astringently upon the bowels. Bruised in red wine, this plant is curative of dysentery. It is only bruised, however, with the greatest difficulty. It is extremely useful also as a fomentation for gum boils. The end of autumn is the time for gathering it, after the leaves are off, it being then left to dry in the shade. Chapter 30. Ladanam, 18 Remedies. Diarrhea may be also arrested by the use of either kind of ladanum. The kind which is found in cornfields is pounded for this purpose and then passed through a sieve, being taken either in hydromel or in wine of the highest quality. Ledon is the name of the plant from which ladanum is obtained in Cyprus, it being found adhering to the beard of the goats there. The most esteemed, however, is that of Arabia. At the present day it is prepared in Syria and Africa also, being known as toxicum, from the circumstance that in gathering it they pass over the plant a bow with the string stretched and covered with wool, to which the dew-like flocks of ladanum adhere. We have described it at further length when treating of the perfumes. This substance has a very powerful odour and is hard in the extreme, for in fact there is a considerable quantity of earth adhering to it. It is most esteemed when in a pure state, aromatic, soft, green, and resinous. It is of an emollient, desiccative, and ripening nature, and acts as a narcotic. It prevents the hair from falling off, and preserves its dark colour. In combination with hydromel or oil of roses, it is used as an injection for the ears. With the addition of salt, it is employed for the cure of furfuraceous eruptions of the skin, and for running ulcers. Taken with storax, it is good for chronic cough. It is also extremely efficacious as a carminative. Chapter 31. Chondrus, or Pseudo-Dictamnon, 1 remedy. Hypocystis, or Orobethron, 2 varieties, 8 remedies. Chondrus 2, or Pseudo-Dictamnon, acts astringently on the bowels. Hypocystis, by some known also as Orobethron, is similar to an unripe pomegranate in appearance. It grows, as already stated, beneath the cysthus, whence its name. Dried in the shade and taken in astringent red wine, these plants arrest diarrhea, for there are 2 kinds of hypocystis, it must be remembered, the white and the red. It is the juice of the plant that is used, being of an astringent, desiccative nature. That of the red kind, however, is the best for fluxes of the stomach. Taken in drink in doses of 3 oboli with amylum, it arrests spitting of blood, and employed either as a potion or as an injection, it is useful for dysentery. Vervain too is good for similar complaints, either taken in water or, when there are no symptoms of fever, in Armenian wine, the proportion being 5 spoonfuls to 3 cyathai of wine. Chapter 32. Laver, or Scion, 2 remedies. Laver, too, a plant which grows in streams, preserved and boiled, is curative of griping pains in the bowels. Chapter 33. Potamogiton, 8 remedies. The status, 3 remedies. Potamogiton, too, taken in wine, is useful for dysentery and colic affections. It is a plant similar to beet in the leaves, but smaller and more hairy, and rising but little above the surface of the water. It is the leaves that are used, being of a refreshing, astringent nature, and particularly good for diseases of the legs, and with honey or vinegar for corrosive ulcers. Castor has given a different description of this plant. According to him, it has a smaller leaf, like horsehair, with a long, smooth stem, and grows in watery localities. With the root of it he used to treat scrofula sores and indurations. Potamogiton neutralizes the effects of the bite of the crocodile. Hence it is that those who go in pursuit of that animal are in the habit of carrying it about them. Achillea also arrests looseness of the bowels, an effect equally produced by the status, a plant with 7 heads, like those of the rose, upon as many stems. Chapter 34. The Serratia, 2 remedies. Leontopodion, Luceuron, Doripetron, or Thoribethron. Lagopus, 3 remedies. The Serratia is a plant with a single leaf and a large knotted root. Taken with the food, it is curative of celiac affections and dysentery. Leontopodium, a plant known also as Luceron, Doripetron, or Thoribethron, has a root which acts astringently upon the bowels and carries off bile, being taken in doses of 2 denarii in hydromel. It grows in champaign localities with a poor soil. The seed, taken in drink, produces nightmare, it is said, in the sleep. Lagopus arrests diarrhea, taken in wine, or if there are symptoms of fever, in water. This plant is attached to the groin for tumors in that part of the body. It grows in cornfields. Many persons recommend, in preference to anything else, for desperate cases of dysentery, a decoction of roots of cinquefoil in milk, or else Aristolochia, in the proportion of 1 victoriatus to 3 cyathai of wine. In the case of the preparations above mentioned, which are recommended to be taken warm, it will be the best plan to heat them with a red-hot iron. On the other hand, again, the juice of the smaller centauri acts as a purgative upon the bowels, and carries off bile, taken in doses of 1 drachma, in 1 hemina of water, with a little salt and vinegar. The greater centauri is curative of griping pains in the bowels. Betony also has a laxative effect, taken in the proportion of 4 drachmae to 9 cyathai of hydromel. The same too with euphorbia or agaric, taken in doses of 2 drachmae with a little salt in water, or else in 3 oboli of honeyed wine. Cyclamenos also is a purgative, either taken in water or used as a suppository. The same too with chamesisos, employed as a suppository. A handful of hyssop boiled down to 1/3 with salt, or beaten up with oxymel and salt, and applied to the abdomen, promotes pituitous evacuations and expels intestinal worms. Root also of Pseudo-Dictamnon carries off pituitous humours and bile. Chapter 35. Epithemon, or Hippophaeus. 8 remedies. The 2 kinds of anagalis, taken in hydromel, are purgative. The same too with epithemon, which is the blossom of a sort of thyme similar to savoury. The only difference being that the flower of this plant is nearer grass green, while that of the other thyme is white. Some persons call it Hippophaeus. This plant is by no means wholesome to the stomach, as it is apt to cause vomiting, but at the same time it disperses flatulency and gripings of the bowels. It is taken also in the form of an electuary for affections of the chest, with honey, or in some cases with iris. Taken in doses of from 4 to 6 drachmae, with honey and a little salt and vinegar, it relaxes the bowels. Some persons, again, give a different description of epithemon. According to them, it is a plant without a root, diminutive and bearing a flower resembling a small hood and of a red colour. They tell us too that it is dried in the shade and taken in water in doses of half an acetabulum, and that it has a slightly laxative effect upon the bowels and carries off the pituitous humours and bile. Nymphea is taken for similar purposes in astringent wine. Chapter 36. Pycnocomon, 4 remedies. Pycnocomon too is a purgative. It is a plant with leaves like those of rocket, only thicker and more acrid. The root is round, of a yellow colour, and with an earthy smell. The stem is quadrangular, of a moderate length, thin, and surmounted with a flower like that of ocimum. It is found growing in rough, stony soils. The root, taken in doses of 2 denarii in hydromel, acts as a purgative upon the bowels, and effectually carries off bile and pituitous humours. The seed, taken in doses of 1 drachma in wine, is productive of dreams and restlessness. Capnos too carries off bile by the urine. Chapter 37. Polypodium, 3 remedies. Polypodium, known to us by the name of Follicula, bears some resemblance to fern. The root of it is used medicinally, being fibrous and of a grass-green colour within, about the thickness of the little finger, and covered with cavernous suckers like those on the arms of the polypus. This plant is of a sweetish taste and is found growing among rocks and under trees. The root is steeped in water and the juice extracted. Sometimes, too, it is cut in small pieces and sprinkled upon cabbage, beet, mallows, or salt meat, or else it is boiled with pap, as a gentle aperient for the bowels, in cases of fever even. It carries off bile also, and the pituitous humours, but acts injuriously upon the stomach. Dried and powdered and applied to the nostrils, it cauterizes polypus of the nose. It has neither seed nor flower. Chapter 38. Scammony, 8 Remedies. Scammony also is productive of derangement of the stomach. It carries off bile and acts strongly as a purgative upon the bowels, unless indeed aloes are added in the proportion of 2 drachmae of aloes to 2 oboli of scammony. The drug thus called is the juice of a plant that is branchy from the root, and has unctuous white triangular leaves, with a solid moist root of a nauseous flavour. It grows in rich white soils. About the period of the rising of the dog-star, an excavation is made about the root to let the juice collect, which done, it is dried in the sun and divided into tablets. The root itself, too, or the outer coat of it, is sometimes dried. The scammony most esteemed is that of Colophon, Mysia, and Priene. In appearance it ought to be smooth and shiny, and as much like bull glue as possible. It should present a fungous surface also, covered with minute holes, should melt with the greatest rapidity, have a powerful smell, and be sticky like gum. When touched with the tongue, it should give out a white milky liquid. It ought also to be extremely light, and to turn white when melted. This last feature is recognised in the spurious scammony also, a compound of meal of fitches and juice of marine Tithimalus, which is mostly imported from Judea, and is very apt to choke those who use it. The difference may be easily detected, however, by the taste, as Tithimalus imparts a burning sensation to the tongue. To be fully efficacious, scammony should be 2 years old. Before or after that age it is useless. It has been prescribed to be taken by itself also in doses of 4 oboli with hydromel and salt. But the most advantageous mode of using it is in combination with aloes, care being taken to drink honeyed wine the moment it begins to operate. The root, too, is boiled down in vinegar to the consistency of honey, and the decoction used as a liniment for leprosy. The head is also rubbed with this decoction, mixed with oil, for headache. Chapter 39. The Tithimalus Harachais. The Tithimalus is called by our people the milk plant, and by some persons the goat lettuce. They say that if characters are traced upon the body with the milky juice of this plant and powdered with ashes, when dry the letters will be perfectly visible, an expedient which has been adopted before now by intriguers for the purpose of communicating with their mistresses, in preference to a correspondence by letter. There are numerous varieties of this plant. The first kind has the additional name of Harachais, and is generally looked upon as the male plant. Its branches are about a finger in thickness, red and full of juice, 5 or 6 in number, and a cubit in length. The leaves near the root are almost exactly those of the olive, and the extremity of the stem is surmounted with a tuft like that of the bulrush. It is found growing in rugged localities near the seashore. The seed is gathered in autumn together with the tufts, and after being dried in the sun is beaten out and put by for keeping. As to the juice, the moment the down begins to appear upon the fruit, the branches are broken off, and the juice of them is received upon either meal of fitches or else figs, and left to dry therewith. 5 drops are as much as each fig ought to receive, and the story is that if a dropsical patient eats one of these figs, he will have as many motions as the fig has received drops. While the juice is being collected, due care must be taken not to let it touch the eyes. From the leaves pounded, a juice is also extracted, but not of so useful a nature as the other kind. A decoction too is made from the branches. The seed also is used, being boiled with honey and made up into purgative pills. These seeds are sometimes inserted in hollow teeth with wax. The teeth are rinsed too with a decoction of the root in wine or oil. The juice is used externally for lichens and is taken internally both as an emetic and to promote alveine evacuation. In other respects, it is prejudicial to the stomach. Taken in drink with the addition of salt, it carries off pituitous humours, and in combination with saltpetre, removes bile. In cases where it is desirable that it should purge by stool, it is taken with oxycrate, but where it is wanted to act as an emetic, with raisin wine or hydromel, 3 oboli being a middling dose. The best method, however, of using it is to eat the prepared figs above mentioned just after taking food. In taste, it is slightly burning to the throat. Indeed, it is of so heating a nature that applied externally by itself, it raises blisters on the flesh, like those caused by the action of fire. Hence it is that it is sometimes employed as a cautery. Chapter 40. The Tithimalus myrtites, or Caryites, 21 remedies. A second kind of Tithimalus is called myrtites by some persons, and Caryites by others. It has leaves like those of myrtle, pointed and prickly, but with a softer surface, and grows, like the one already mentioned, in rugged soils. The tufted heads of it are gathered just as barley is beginning to swell in the ear, and after being left for 9 days in the shade, are thoroughly dried in the sun. The fruit does not ripen all at once, some indeed not till the ensuing year. The name given to this fruit is the nut, whence the Greek appellation Caryites. It is gathered at harvest and is washed and dried, being given with twice the quantity of black poppy in doses of 1 acetabulum in all. As an emetic, this kind is not so efficacious as the preceding one, and indeed the same may be said of all the others. Some physicians recommend the leaf to be taken in the manner already mentioned, but say that the nut should either be taken in honeyed wine or raisin wine, or else with sesame. It carries off pituitous humours and bile by stool, and is curative of ulcerations of the mouth. For corrosive sores of the mouth, the leaf is eaten with honey. Chapter 41. The Tithimalos paralios, or Tithimalus, 4 remedies. A third kind of Tithimalus is known by the additional name of paralios, or else as Tithimalus. The leaf is round, the stem a palm in height, the branches red, and the seed white. This seed is gathered just as the grape is beginning to form, and is dried and pounded, being taken as a purgative in doses of 1 acetabulum. Chapter 42. The Tithimalus Cryoscipios, 18 remedies. A fourth kind of Tithimalus is known by the additional name of Cryoscipios. It has leaves like those of purslane, and some 4 or 5 small branches standing out from the root, of a red colour, half a foot in height, and full of juice. This plant grows in the vicinity of towns. The seed is white, and pigeons are remarkably fond of it. It receives its additional name of Cryoscipios from the fact that the heads of it turn with the sun. Taken in doses of half an acetabulum in oxymel, it carries off bile by stool. In other respects, it has the same properties as the Harachais above mentioned. Chapter 43. The Tithimalus cyparisias, 18 remedies. In the 5th place, we have the Tithimalus known as cyparisias, from the resemblance of its leaves to those of the cypress. It has a double or triple stem, and grows in champaign localities. Its properties are exactly similar to those of the Cryoscipios and Harachais. Chapter 44. The Tithimalus, Platyphilus, Corymbites, or Amygdalites. 3 remedies. The 6th kind is called Platyphilus by some, and Corymbites or Amygdalites by others, from its resemblance to the almond tree. The leaves of this kind are the largest of all. It has a fatal effect upon fish. An infusion of the root or leaves, or the juice, taken in doses of 4 drachmae in honeyed wine or hydromel, acts as a purgative. It is particularly useful also for carrying off the aqueous humours. Chapter 45. The Tithimalus dendroides, Cobios, or Leptophilos. 18 remedies. The 7th kind has the additional name of dendroides, and is known by some persons as Cobios, and by others as Leptophilos. It grows among rocks, and is by far the most shrubby of all the varieties of the Tithimalus. The stems of it are small and red, and the seed is remarkably abundant. Its properties are the same as those of the Harachais. Chapter 46. The Apios ischas, or Raphanos agria. 2 remedies. The Apios ischas, or Raphanos agria, throws out 2 or 3 rush-like branches of a red colour, creeping upon the ground, and bearing leaves like those of rue. The root resembles that of an onion, only that it is larger, for which reason some have called it the wild radish. The interior of this root is composed of a mommose substance containing a white juice. The outer coat is black. It grows in rugged, mountainous spots, and sometimes in pasture lands. It is taken up in spring and pounded and put into an earthen vessel, that portion of it being removed which floats upon the surface. The part which remains acts purgatively, taken in doses of an obolus and a half in hydromel, both as an emetic and by stool. This juice is administered also in doses of 1 acetabulum for dropsy. The root of this plant is dried and powdered and taken in drink. The upper part of it, they say, carries off bile by acting as an emetic, the lower part by promoting alvine evacuation. Chapter 47. Remedies for griping pains in the bowels. Every kind of panacées is curative of gripings in the bowels, as also betony, except in those cases where they arise from indigestion. Juice of Pseudo-Dictamnon is good for flatulency, acting powerfully as a carminative. The same is the case also with root of acheron and with docus, eaten like lettuce as a salad. Ladanam of Cyprus, taken in drink, is curative of intestinal affections, and a similar effect is produced by powdered gentian, taken in warm water, in quantities about as large as a bean. For the same purpose, plantago is taken in the morning, in doses of 2 spoonfuls, with 1 spoonful of poppy in 4 cyathai of wine, due care being taken that it is not old wine. It is given too at the last moment before going to sleep, and with the addition of nitre or polenta, if a considerable time has elapsed since the last meal. For colic, an injection of the juice is used, 1 hymena at a time, even in cases where fever has supervened. Chapter 48. Remedies for diseases of the spleen. Agaric, taken in doses of 3 oboli and 1 cyathus of old wine, is curative of diseases of the spleen. The same too with the root of every kind of panacées, taken in honeyed wine. Tucria also is particularly useful for the same purpose, taken in a dry state, or boiled down in the proportion of 1 handful to 3 hymenae of vinegar. Tucria too is applied with vinegar to wounds of the spleen, or if the patient cannot bear the application of vinegar, with figs or water. Polymonia is taken in wine, and betony in doses of 1 drachma in 3 cyathai of oxymel. Aristolochia too is used in the same manner as for injuries inflicted by serpents. Argemonia, it is said, taken with the food for 7 consecutive days, diminishes the volume of the spleen. and a similar effect is attributed to agaric, taken in doses of 2 oboli in oxymel. Root 2 of Nymphaea heraclea, taken in wine or by itself, diminishes the spleen. Chrysanthemos, taken twice a day in doses of 1 drachma and 2 cyathai of white wine for 40 consecutive days, gradually carries off the spleen, it is said, by urine. Hyssop, boiled with figs, is very useful for the same purpose. Root of Longitis also, boiled before it has shed its seed. A decoction of root of Pseudo-Dictamnon is good for the spleen and kidneys. Acheron, taken in drink, diminishes the spleen, and the roots of it are very beneficial for the viscera and iliac regions. For similar purposes, seed of Clymenus is taken for 30 consecutive days in doses of 1 denarius in white wine. Powdered betony is also used, taken in a potion with honey and squill vinegar. Root 2 of Longitis is taken in water. Teucrium is used externally for diseases of the spleen. Scordium also in combination with wax, and agaric mixed with powdered fenugreek. End of section 2.
Section 3 of the Natural History, Volume 6. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Natural History, Volume 6 by Pliny the Elder, translated by John Bostock and Henry Thomas Riley. Section 3, Book 26, Chapters 49 to 70. Chapter 49, Remedies for Calculi and Diseases of the Bladder. For diseases of the bladder and calculi, affections which, as already observed, produce the most excruciating torments, Polymonia is highly efficacious taken in wine. Agaric also in leaves or root of plantago taken in raisin wine. Betony too is very good, as already observed, when speaking of diseases of the liver. This last plant is used also for hernia, applied topically or taken in drink. It is remarkably efficacious too for strangury. For calculi, some persons recommend betony, vervain, and milfoil in equal proportions in water as a sovereign remedy. It is universally agreed that titany is curative of strangury, and that the same is the case with cinquefoil, boiled down to 1/3 in wine. This last plant is very useful too, taken internally and applied topically for rupture of the groin. The upper part of the root of Ziphion has a diuretic effect upon infants. It is administered also in water for rupture of the groin, and is applied topically for diseases of the bladder. Juice of Pseudo-Dictamnon is employed for hernia in infants, and Psyllium is used as an application in cases of umbilical hernia. The 2 kinds of anagalus are diuretic, and a similar effect is produced by a decoction of root of acheron, or the plant itself bruised and taken in drink. This last is good too for all affections of the bladder. Both the stem and root of cotyledon are used for the cure of calculi, and for all inflammations of the genitals. Myrrh is mixed in equal proportions with the stem and seed. The more tender leaves of ebulum, beaten up and taken with wine, expel calculi of the bladder, and an application of them is curative of diseases of the testes. Erigeron, with powdered frankincense and sweet wine, is curative of inflammation of the testes, and root of symphytum, applied topically, reduces rupture of the groin. The white hypokystis is curative of corroding ulcers of the genitals. Artemisia is prescribed also in sweet wine for the cure of calculi and of strangury, and root of Nymphaea heraclea, taken in wine, allays pains in the bladder. Chapter 50, Crethmos, 11 Remedies. Catchery. A similar property belongs also to Crethmos, a plant highly praised by Hippocrates. This is one of the wild plants that are commonly eaten. At all events, we find Callimachus mentioning it as one of the viands set on table by the peasant Hecale. It is a species of garden batis with a stem a palm in height, and a hot seed odoriferous like that of Libanotus, and round. When dried, the seed bursts asunder and discloses in the interior a white kernel known as catchery to some. The leaf is unctuous and of a whitish color, like that of the olive, only thicker and of a saltish taste. The roots are 3 or 4 in number, and about a finger in thickness. The plant grows in rocky localities upon the sea shore. It is eaten raw, or else boiled with cabbage, and has a pleasant aromatic flavor. It is preserved also in brine. This plant is particularly useful for strangury, the leaves, stem, or root being taken in wine. It improves the complexion of the skin also, but if taken in excess is very apt to produce flatulency. Used in the form of a decoction, it relaxes the bowels, has a diuretic effect, and carries off the humours from the kidneys. The same is the case also with alkia. Dried and powdered and taken in wine, it removes strangury, and with the addition of daucus is still more efficacious. It is good too for the spleen, and is taken in drink as an antidote to the venom of serpents. Mixed with their barley, it is remarkably beneficial for beasts of burden when suffering from pituitous deflections or strangury. Chapter 51. The Anthillion. 2 Remedies. The Anthillus. 2 Remedies. The Anthillion is a plant very like the lentil. Taken in wine, it is remedial for diseases of the bladder, and arrests hemorrhage. Another variety of it is the Anthillus, a plant resembling the Camipittus, with a purple flower, a powerful smell, and a root like that of endive. Chapter 52. Capia. 1 Remedy. The plant known as capia is even more efficacious. It resembles purslane in appearance, but has a darker root that is never used. It grows upon the sands of the seashore, and has a bitter taste. Taken in wine with root of asparagus, it is remarkably useful for diseases of the bladder. Chapter 53. Hypericon. Chamipidus, or Corison. 9 Remedies. Hypericon, otherwise known as the Chamipidus or Corison, is possessed of similar properties. It is a plant with a stem like that of a garden vegetable, thin, red, and a cubit in length. The leaf is similar to that of rue, and has an acrid smell. The seed is enclosed in a swarthy pod, and ripens at the same time as barley. This seed is of an astringent nature, arrests diarrhea, and acts as a diuretic. It is taken also for diseases of the bladder in wine. Chapter 54. Keros, or Hypericon. 10 Remedies. There is another Hypericon also, known as Keros. By some, the leaves of it resemble those of the tamarix, beneath which it grows, but are more unctuous and not so red. It is an odoriferous plant, somewhat more than a palm in height, of a sweet flavor and slightly pungent. The seed is of a warming nature, and is consequently productive of eructations. It is not, however, injurious to the stomach. This plant is particularly useful for strangury, provided the bladder be not ulcerated. Taken in wine, it is curative of pleurisy also. Chapter 55. The Calothrix. 1 Remedy. The Purpressa. 1 Remedy. The Chrysanthemum. 1 Remedy. The Anthemus. 1 Remedy. Calothrix, beaten up with cumin seed and administered in white wine, is useful also for diseases of the bladder. Leaves of vervain, boiled down to 1/3, or root of vervain, in warm honeyed wine, expel calculi of the bladder. Purpressa, a plant which grows in the vicinity of Arretium and in Illyricum, is boiled down to 1/3 in 3 hemini of water, and the decoction taken in drink. The same too with trefoil, which is administered in wine, and the same with the chrysanthemum. The anthemus also is an expellent of calculi. It is a plant with 5 small leaves running from the root, 2 long stems, and a flower like a rose. The roots of it are pounded and administered alone, in the same way as raw laver. Chapter 56. Soleus. One remedy. Soleus is a plant which grows in running streams with a gravelly bed. It bears some resemblance to parsley, and is a cubit in height. It is cooked in the same manner as the acid vegetables, and is of great utility for affections of the bladder. In cases where that organ is affected with eruptions, it is used in combination with root of Panaces, a plant which is otherwise bad for the bladder. The erratic apple, too, is expellent of calculi. For this purpose, a pound of the root is boiled down to 1/2 in a congius of wine, and 1 hemina of the decoction is taken for 3 consecutive days, the remainder being taken in wine with Siam. Sea nettle is employed too for the same purpose, Daucus and seed of Plantago in wine. Chapter 57. The Plantifolia. The Plantifolia too, so called from the first discoverer of it, and well known to herbalists, bruised in wine, acts as a diuretic. Chapter 58. Remedies for diseases of the testes and of the fundament. Scordion reduces swelling of the testes. Henbane is curative of diseases of the generative organs. Strangury is cured by juice of Pseudo-Dictamnon, taken with honey, as also by the seed of that plant. Agaric is also used for the same purpose, taken in doses of 3 oboli in 1 cyanthus of old wine. Root of trefoil in doses of 2 drachmae in wine, and root or seed of Daucus in doses of 1 drachma. For the cure of sciatica, the seed and leaves of Erythrodanum are used, pounded. Panaces taken in drink. Polemonia employed as a friction, and leaves of Aristolochia in the form of decoction. Agaric taken in doses of 3 oboli in 1 cyanthus of old wine is curative of affections of the tendon known as platus, and of pains in the shoulders. Cinquefoil is either taken in drink or applied topically for the cure of sciatica. A decoction of scammony is used also with barley meal, and the seed of either kind of hypericon is taken in wine. For diseases of the fundament and for excoriations, Plantago is remarkably efficacious. For condylomata, cinquefoil, and for procadence of the rectum, root of cyclamenos applied in vinegar. The blue anagallis reduces procedence of the rectum, while on the contrary that with a red flower has a tendency to bear it down. Cotyledon is a marvellous cure for condylomatous affections and piles, and root of acheron boiled in wine and beaten up is a good application for swelling of the testes. According to what Cato says, those who carry about them Pontic wormwood will never experience chafing between the thighs. 9. Some persons add pennyroyal to the number of these plants, gathered fasting, they say, and attached to the hinder part of the body. It will be an effectual preservative against all pains in the groin, and will allay them in cases where they already exist. Chapter 59. Inguinalis or argamo. Inguinalis again, or as some persons call it, argamo, a plant commonly found growing in bushes and thickets, needs only to be held in the hand to be productive of beneficial effects upon the groin. Chapter 60. Remedies for inflamed tumors. Cryoscipios. One remedy. Panaces applied with honey heals inflammatory tumors, an effect which is equally produced by Plantago applied with salt. Cinquefoil, root of persillata, used in the same way as for Scrofula. Damascenium also, and verbascum, pounded with the root and then sprinkled with wine and wrapped in a leaf, warmed upon ashes and applied hot. Persons of experience in these matters have asserted that it is of primary importance that the application should be made by a maiden, as also that she must be naked at the time and fasting. The patient must be fasting too, and the damsel must say, touching him with the back of her hand, Apollo forbids that a disease shall increase, which a naked virgin restrains. So saying, she must withdraw her hand and repeat to the above effect 3 times, both of them spitting upon the ground each time. Root 2 of mandragora is used for this purpose with water. A decoction of root of scammony with honey, sideritis beaten up with stale grease, horehound with stale axle grease, or Cryoscipios, a plant which owes its name to its discoverer, with pulpy figs. Chapter 61. 10 Aphrodisiacs and Antiphrodisiacs. Nymphea heraclea, used as already stated, acts most powerfully as an antiphrodisiac, the same too if taken once every 40 days in drink. Taken in drink, fasting, or eaten with the food, it effectually prevents the recurrence of libidinous dreams. The root, too, used in the form of a liniment and applied to the generative organs, not only represses all prurient desires, but arrests the seminal secretions as well, for which reason it is said to have a tendency to make flesh and to improve the voice. The upper part of the root of Ziphion, taken in wine, acts as an aphrodisiac. The same is the case too with the wild crethmos, or agrios as it is called, and with orminum, beaten up with polenta. Chapter 62. The orchis or Serrapius. 5 medicinal properties. Satyrion. But there are few plants of so marvelous a nature as the orchis or Serrapius, a vegetable production with leaves like those of the leek, a stem a palm in height, a purple flower, and a twofold root, formed of the tuberosities which resemble the testes in appearance. The larger of these tuberosities, or as some say, the harder of the two, taken in water, is provocative of lust, while the smaller, or in other words the softer one, taken in goat's milk, acts as an antiphrodisiac. Some persons describe this plant as having a leaf like that of the squill, only smoother and softer, and a prickly stem. The roots heal ulcerations of the mouth, and are curative of pituitous discharges from the chest. Taken in wine, they act astringently upon the bowels. Satyrion is also a powerful stimulant. There are 2 kinds of it. The first has leaves like those of the olive, but longer, a stem 4 fingers in length, a purple flower, and a double root, resembling the human testes in shape. This root swells and increases in volume 1 year, and resumes its original size the next. The other kind is known as the Satyrios orchis, and is supposed to be the female plant. It is distinguished from the former one by the distance between its joints and its more branchy and shrub-like form. The root is employed in philters, and it is mostly found growing near the sea. Beaten up and applied with polenta, or by itself, it heals tumors and various other affections of the generative organs. The root of the first kind, administered in the milk of a colonic sheep, causes tentigo. Taken in water, it produces a contrary effect. Chapter 63. Satyrion. 3 medicinal properties. Satyrion erythricon. 4 medicinal properties. The Greeks give the name of Satyrion to a plant with red leaves like those of the lily, but smaller, not more than 3 of them making their appearance above ground. The stem, they say, is smooth and bare, and a cubit in length, and the root double, the lower part, which is also the larger, promoting the conception of male issue, the upper or smaller part, that of female. They distinguish also another kind of Satyrion by the name of erythricon. It has seed like that of the vitex, only larger, smooth, and hard. The root, they say, is covered with a red rind, and is white within, and of a sweetish taste. It is mostly found in mountainous districts. The root, we are told, if only held in the hand, acts as a powerful aphrodisiac, and even more so if it is taken in rough, astringent wine. It is administered in drink, they say, to rams and he-goats when inactive and sluggish, and the people of Sarmatia are in the habit of giving it to their stallions when fatigued with covering, a defect to which they give the name of prosedamum. The effects of this plant are neutralized by the use of hydromel or lettuces. The Greeks, however, give the general name of Satyrion to all substances of a stimulating tendency to the crataegus, for example, the theligonon and the arenogonon, plants the seed of which bears a resemblance to the testes. Persons who carry the pith of branches of Tithimalus about them are rendered more amorous thereby. It is said the statements are really incredible which Theophrastus, in most cases an author of high authority, makes in relation to this subject. Thus, for instance, he says that by the contact only of a certain plant a man has been enabled in the sexual congress to repeat his embraces as many as 70 times even. The name and genus, however, of this plant he has omitted to mention. Chapter 64, Remedies for the gout and diseases of the feet. Sideritis, attached to the body as an amulet, reduces varicose veins and effects a painless cure. Gout used to be an extremely rare disease, not in the times of our fathers and grandfathers only, but within my own memory even. Indeed, it may justly be considered a foreign complaint, for if it had been formerly known in Italy, it would surely have found a Latin name. It should, however, by no means be looked upon as an incurable malady, for before now, in many instances, it has quitted the patient all at once, and still more frequently a cure has been effected by proper treatment. For the cure of gout, roots of panaceas are used mixed with raisins, juice of henbane, or the seed combined with meal, scordium taken in vinegar, iberis, as already mentioned, vervain beaten up with axle grease, or root of cyclamenos, a decoction of which is good also for chilblains. As cooling application for gout, root of ziphion is used, seed of psyllium, hemlock, with litharge or axle grease, and at the first symptoms of red gout, or in other words hot gout, the plant izum. For either kind of gout, arigaron with axle grease is very useful, leaves of plantago beaten up with a little salt, or argamonia pounded with honey. An application of vervain is also remedial, and it is a good plan to soak the feet in a decoction of that plant in water. Chapter 65, Lapago or Malugo, one remedy, Asperugo, one remedy. Lapago is employed also for this disease, a plant similar to the Anagallis, were it not that it is more branchy, bristling with a greater number of leaves, covered with rugosities, full of a more acrid juice, and possessed of a powerful smell. The kind that resembles Anagallis most closely is known as Malugo. Asperugo is a similar plant, only with a more prickly leaf. The juice of the first is taken daily in doses of 1 denarius into kyathi of wine. Chapter 66, Phycos thalassian, or seaweed, 3 varieties of it, Lapa, Bo, Aria. But it is the Phycos thalassian, or seaweed more particularly, that is so excellent a remedy for the gout. It resembles the lettuce in appearance, and is used as the basis in dyeing tissues with the purple of the murex. Used before it becomes dry, it is efficacious as a topical application, not only for gout, but for all diseases of the joints. There are 3 kinds of it, one with a broad leaf, another with a longer leaf of a reddish hue, and a third with a crisp leaf, and used in Crete for dyeing clothes. All these kinds have similar properties, and we find Nicander prescribing them in wine as an antidote to the venom of serpents even. The seed also of the plant which we have spoken of as psyllion is useful for the cure of gout. It is first steeped in water, and 1 hemina of the seed is then mixed with 2 spoonfuls of resin of colophon and 1 spoonful of frankincense. Leaves of mandragora, 2, are highly esteemed for this purpose, beaten up with polenta. 11. For swellings of the ankles, slime, kneaded up with oil, is wonderfully useful, and for swellings of the joints, the juice of the smaller centauri, this last being remarkably good also for diseases of the sinews. Centaurus, too, is very useful, and for pains in the sinews of the shoulder blades, shoulders, vertebrae, and loins. An infusion of batoni is taken in drink in the same way as for diseases of the liver. Cinquefoil is applied topically to the joints, and a similar use is made of the leaves of mandragora, mixed with polenta, or else the root beaten up fresh with wild cucumber, or boiled in water. For chaps upon the toes, root of Polypodium is used, and for diseases of the joints, juice of henbane with axle grease, ammonium with a decoction of the plant, centuculus boiled, or fresh moss steeped in water, and attached to the part till it is quite dry. The root, too, of Lapa Boaria, taken in wine, is productive of similar effects. A decoction of cyclamenos in water is curative of chilblains and all other affections resulting from cold. For chilblains, cotyledon is also employed with axle grease. Leaves of batrachion and juice of epithymum ladanum, mixed with castoreum and vervain, applied with wine. Extract corns from the feet. Chapter 67. Maladies which attack the whole of the body. Having now finished the detail of the diseases which are perceptible in individual parts of the body, we shall proceed to speak of those which attack the whole of the body. The following I find mentioned as general remedies. In preference to anything else, an infusion of dodecathios, a plant already described, should be taken in drink, and then the roots of the several kinds of panaceas. In maladies of long standing, more particularly, seed too of panaceas should be used for intestinal complaints. For all painful affections of the body, we find juice of scordium recommended, as also that of betony. This last, taken in a potion, is particularly excellent for removing a wan and leaden hue of the skin, and for improving its general appearance. Chapter 68. The geranium, myrrhis or myrtis, 3 varieties of it, 6 remedies. The plant geranium has the additional names of myrrhis and myrtis. It is similar to hemlock in appearance, but has a smaller leaf and a shorter stem, rounded and of a pleasant taste and odor. Such, at all events, is the description given of it by our herbalists, but the Greeks speak of it as bearing leaves a little whiter than those of the mallow, thin downy stems and branches at intervals, some 2 palms in length, with small heads at their extremities, in the midst of the leaves resembling the bill of a crane. There is also another variety of this plant, with leaves like those of the anemone, but with deeper incisions, and a root rounded like an apple, sweet and extremely useful and refreshing for invalids when recovering their strength. This last would almost seem to be the true geranium. For phthisis, this plant is taken in the proportion of 1 drachma to 3 kyathi of wine twice a day, as also for flatulency. Eaten raw, it is productive of similar effects. The juice of the root is remedial for diseases of the ear, and for opisthotomy. The seed is taken in drink in doses of 4 drachmae, with pepper and myrrh. Juice of plantago, taken in drink, is curative of phthisis, and a decoction of it is equally good for the purpose. Plantago, taken as a food with oil and salt, immediately after rising in the morning, is extremely refreshing. It is prescribed too, in cases of atrophy, on alternate days. Betony is given with honey, in the form of an electuary, for phthisis, in pieces the size of a bean. Agaric too is taken in doses of 2 oboli, in raisin wine, or else daucus with the greater centauri in wine. For the cure of phagodyna, a name given in common to bulimia and to a corrosive kind of ulcer, Tithimalus, is taken in combination with sesame. Chapter 69. The Onotheris or Oniar, 3 remedies. Among the various evils by which the whole of the body in common is afflicted, that of wakefulness is the most common. Among the remedies for it we find panaceas mentioned, Clymenus and Aristolochia, the odor of the plant being inhaled and the head rubbed with it. Izum or house leek is beneficial, wrapped in black cloth and placed beneath the pillow without the patient being aware of it. The Onotheris too, or oniar, taken in wine, has certain exhilarating properties. It has leaves like those of the almond tree, a rose-colored flower, numerous branches, and a long root, with a vinous smell when dried. An infusion of this root has a soothing effect upon wild beasts even. For fits of indigestion attended with nausea, betony is taken in drink. Used similarly after the evening meal, it facilitates the digestion, taken in the proportion of 1 drachma to 3 kyathi or oxymol. It dispels crapulence. The same is the case too with agaric, taken in warm water after eating. Betony is curative of paralysis, it is said. The same too with iberis, as already stated. This last is good too for numbness of the limbs. The same being the case with argamonia, a plant which disperses those affections which might otherwise necessitate the application of the knife. Chapter 70. Remedies for epilepsy. Epilepsy is cured by the root of the panaceas, which we have spoken of as the Harachais, taken in drink with sea calf's rennet, the proportions being 3 parts of panaceas and 1 of rennet. For the same purpose an infusion of plantago is taken, or else betony or agaric with oxymel, the former in doses of 1 drachma the latter in doses of 3 oboli. Leaves of cinquefoil are taken also in water. Arca zostis is also curative of epilepsy, but it must be taken constantly for a year. Root of bachar, 2, dried and powdered, and taken in warm water, in the proportion of 3 cyathi to 1 cyathus, or coriander. Centuculus, also bruised in vinegar, warm water, or honey. Vervain, taken in wine. Hyssop berries, 3 in number, pounded and taken in water for 16 days consecutively. Ladanam, taken in drink with sea calf's rennet in equal proportions. Leaves of cinquefoil, bruised in wine, and taken for 30 days. Powdered betony in doses of 3 denarii. 1 cyanthus of squill vinegar, and an ounce of Attic honey, as also scamony in the proportion of 2 oboli to 4 drachmae of castoreum. End of section 3.
Section 4 of The Natural History, Volume 6. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Sarah Mobley. The Natural History, Volume 6 by Pliny the Elder. Translated by John Bostock and Henry Thomas Riley. Section 4, Book 26, Chapters 71 to 93. Chapter 71, Remedies for Fevers. Agaric taken in warm water alleviates cold fevers. Sideritis in combination with oil is good for tertian fevers. Bruised ladanum also, which is found in cornfields. Plantago taken in doses of 2 drachmae in hydromel, a couple of hours before the paroxysms come on. Juice of the root of plantago made warm or subjected to pressure, or else in the root itself beaten up in water made warm with a hot iron. Some medical men prescribe 3 roots of plantago in 3 cyathi of water, and in a similar manner 4 roots for quartan fevers. When buglossose is beginning to wither, if a person takes the pith out of the stem, and says while so doing that it is for the cure of such and such a person suffering from fever, and then attaches 7 leaves to the patient just before the paroxysms come on, he will experience a cure, they say. Fevers, too, those which are attended with recurrent cold shiverings, more particularly, are cured by administering 1 drachma of betony, or else agaric, in 3 cyathi of hydromel. Some medical men recommend 3 leaves of cinquefoil for tertian, 4 for quartan, and an increased number for other fevers, while others again prescribe in all cases 3 oboli of cinquefoil with pepper and hydromel. Vervain, administered in water, is curative of fever, and beasts of burden even, but care must be taken, in cases of tertian fever, to cut the plant at the 3rd joint, and of quartan fever at the 4th. The seed of either kind of hypericon is taken also for quartan fevers and cold shiverings. Powdered betony modifies these fits, and panaceas is of so warming a nature that persons, when about to travel amid the snow, are recommended to drink an infusion of it, and to rub the body all over with the plant. Aristolochia also arrests shivering produced by cold. Chapter 72. Remedies for Phrenitis, Lethargy, and Carbuncles. Phrenitis is cured by sleep induced by the agency of an infusion of Buccatinum in vinegar poured on the head, or else by the juice of either kind of anagallis. On the other hand, when patients are suffering from lethargy, it is with the great difficulty that they are aroused, a result which may be effected, they say, by touching the nostrils with juice of Buccatinum in vinegar. For the cure of insanity, betony is administered in drink. Panaceas brings carbuncles to a head and makes them break, and they are equally cured by powdered betony applied in water, or else cabbage leaves mixed with frankincense in warm water and taken in considerable quantities. For a similar purpose, a red-hot coal is extinguished in the patient's presence, and the ashes are taken up with the finger and applied to the sore. Bruised plantago is also used for the cure of carbuncles. Chapter 73. Remedies for dropsy, acute or ebulum, chymaecty. For the cure of dropsy, Tithimalus coriaceus is employed, panaceas also. Plantago used as a diet, dry bread being eaten first, without any drink, betony taken in doses of 2 drachmae in 2 scythe of ordinary wine or honeyed wine, agaric or seed of longitis in doses of 2 spoonfuls in water. Cilion, taken in wine, juice of either anagalus, root of cotyledon in honeyed wine, root of ebulum, fresh gathered, with the mold shaken off, but not washed in water. A pinch in 2 fingers being taken in 1 hemina of old wine mold, root of trefoil taken in doses of 2 drachmae in wine, Tithimalus, known as platyphilus, seed of the hypericon, otherwise known as caros, the plant called acti, the same thing as ebulum, according to some, the root of it being pounded in 3 scythe of wine if there are no symptoms of fever, or the seed of it being administered in red wine, a good handful of vervain also, boiled down in water to 1/2. But all of the remedies for this disease, juice of Chamaecte is looked upon as by far the most efficacious. Morbid or pituitous eruptions are cured by the agency of Plantago or else the root of cyclamenos with honey. Leaves of ebulum, bruised in old wine and applied topically, are curative of the disease called boa, which makes its appearance in the form of red pimples. Juice of strychnus applied as a liniment is curative of perigo. Chapter 74. Remedies for Erysipelas. For the cure of erysipelas, isoum is used, or else pounded leaves of hemlock, or root of mandragora, this last being cut into round slices like cucumber and suspended over must, after which it is hung up in the smoke and then pounded in wine or vinegar. It is a good plan to use some fermentations with myrtle wine. 2 ounces of mint beaten up in vinegar with 1 ounce of live sulphur form a mixture sometimes employed, as also soot mixed with vinegar. There are several kinds of erysipelas, one in particular which attacks the middle of the body and is known as zoster. Should it entirely surround the body, its effects are fatal. For this disease, Plantago is remedial, mixed with camoleon chalk, vervain used by itself, or root of persillata. For other kinds of erysipelas of spreading nature, root of cotyledon is used, mixed with honeyed wine. Isoum also, or juice of linozostis in combination with vinegar. Chapter 75. Remedies for Sprains. For the cure of sprains, root of Polypodium is used in the form of a liniment. The pain and swelling are modified also by seed of Cilion. Leaves of Plantago beaten up with a little salt, seed of verbascum boiled in wine and pounded, or hemlock with axle grease. Leaves of ephemeron are applied topically to tumors and tuberosities, so long as they are capable of being dispersed. Chapter 76. Remedies for Jaundice. It is upon the eyes in particular that jaundice is productive of so remarkable an effect. The bile penetrating between the membranes, so extremely delicate as they are, and so closely united. Hippocrates tells us that the appearance of jaundice on or after the 7th day in fevers is a fatal symptom. But I am acquainted with some instances in which the patient survived after having been reduced to this apparently hopeless state. We may remark also that jaundice sometimes comes on without fever superventing. It is combated by taking the Greater Centauri, as already mentioned, in drink, agaric in doses of 3 oboli in old wine, or leaves of vervain in doses of 3 oboli, taken for 4 consecutive days in 1 hemina of mulled wine. But the most speedy cure of all is effected by using juice of cinquefoil in doses of 3 scythe with salt and honey. Root of cyclamenos is also taken in drink in doses of 3 drachmae, the patient sitting in a warm room free from all cold and draughts, the infusion expelling the bile by its action as a sudorific. Leaves of the tussilago are also used in water for this purpose. The seed of either kind of linozostis sprinkled in the drink, or made into a decoction with chickpeas or wormwood. Hyssop berries taken in water. The plant lichen, all other vegetables being carefully abstained from while it is being used, polythrix taken in wine, and struthion in honeyed wine. Chapter 77, Remedies for Boils. There are boils, also known as furunculi, which make their appearance indiscriminately on all parts of the body, and are productive of the greatest inconvenience. Sometimes, indeed, when the constitution is exhausted, they are fatal in their effects. For their cure, leaves of pycnocommon are employed, beaten up with polenta, if the boil has not come to a head. They are dispersed also by an application of leaves of ephedrine. Chapter 78, Remedies for Fistula. Fistulas, too, insidiously attack all parts of the body, owing to unskillfulness on the part of medical men in the use of the knife. The smaller centaury is used for the cure, with the addition of lotions and boiled honey. Juice of plantago is also employed as an injection. Cinquefoil mixed with salt and honey. Ladanum combined with castoreum. Cotyledon applied hot with stag's marrow. Pith of the root of verbascum reduced to a liquid state in the shape of a lotion and injected. Root of aristolochia or juice of Tithimalus. Chapter 79, Remedies for Abscesses and Hard Tumors. Abscesses and inflammations are cured by an application of leaves of argamonia. For indurations and gatherings of all descriptions, a decoction of vervain or cinquefoil and vinegar is used. Leaves or root of verbascum, a liniment made of wine and hyssop, root of a coron, a decoction of it being used as a fomentation, or else izoum. Contusions also, hard tumors, and fistulous abscesses are treated with illicabra. All kinds of foreign substances which have pierced the flesh are extracted by using leaves of tussilago, daucus, or seed of Leontopodium, pounded in water with polenta. To suppurations, leaves of pycnocommon are applied, beaten up with polenta, or else the seed of that plant, or orchis. An application of root of sadaron is said to be a most efficacious remedy for deep-seated diseases of the bones. Corrosive ulcers and all kinds of gatherings are treated with seaweed, used before it has dried. Root 2 of alcima disperses gatherings. Chapter 80, Remedies for Burns. Burns are cured by the agency of plantago or of arction, so effectually indeed as to leave no scar. The leaves of this last plant are boiled in water, beaten up, and applied to the sore. Roots of cyclamenus are used in combination with izoum, the kind of hypericon also which we have mentioned being called corysum. Chapter 81, Remedies for Diseases of the Sinews and Joints. For diseases of the sinews and joints, plantago, beaten up with salt, is a very powerful remedy, or else argamonia, pounded with honey. Patients affected with spasms or tetanus are rubbed with juice of Peucadium. For indurations of the sinews, juice of agalops is employed, and for pains in those parts of the body, origeron or epithymum used as a liniment with vinegar. In cases of spasms and opus thotoni, it is an excellent plan to rub the part affected with seed of the hypericon, known as charos, and to take the seed and drink. Phrynion, it is said, will effect a cure even when the sinews have been severed, if applied instantaneously, bruised or chewed. For spasmodic affections, fits of trembling, and opus thotoni, root of alcima is administered in hydromel. Used in this manner, it has a warming effect when the limbs are benumbed with cold. Chapter 82, Remedies for Hemorrhage. The red seed of the plant called paeonia arrests hemorrhage. The root is also possessed of similar properties, but it is clematis that should be employed when there are discharges of blood at the mouth or nostrils, from the bowels or from the uterus. In such cases, lysimachia, also taken in drink, applied topically or introduced into the nostrils, or else seed of plantago or cinquefoil is taken in drink or employed in the form of a liniment. Hemlock seed is introduced into the nostrils for discharges of blood there, or else it is pounded and applied in water. Izoum also and root of astragalus. Isahaemon and Achillea likewise arrest hemorrhage. Chapter 83. Hippurus, otherwise called ephedrine, Anabasis or aquisodum, 3 kinds of it, 18 remedies. Aquisitum, a plant called Hipparus by the Greeks, and which we have mentioned in terms of condemnation when treating of meadowlands, it being in fact a sort of hair of the earth, similar in appearance to horsehair, is used by runners for the purpose of diminishing the spleen. For this purpose, it is boiled down in a new earthen vessel to 1/3, the vessel being filled to the brim, and the decoction taken in doses of 1 hemina for 3 successive days. It is strictly forbidden, however, to eat any food of a greasy nature the day before taking it. Among the Greeks there are various opinions in relation to this plant. According to some, who give it the name of Hipparus, it has leaves like those of the pine tree, and of a swarthy hue. And, if we are to believe them, it is possessed of the virtues of such a marvelous nature that if touched by the patient only, it will arrest hemorrhage. Some authorities call it Hipparus, others again ephedrine, and others Anabasis, and they tell us that it grows near trees, the trunks of which it ascends, and hangs down therefrom in numerous tufts of black rush-like hair, much like a horse's tail in appearance. The branches, we are told, are thin and articulated, and the leaves few in number, small and thin, the seed round and similar to coriander in appearance, and the root ligneous. It grows, they say, in plantations more particularly. This plant is possessed of astringent properties. The juice of it, kept in the nostrils, arrests bleeding therefrom, and it acts astringently upon the bowels. Taken in doses of 3 scythe in sweet wine, it is a cure for dysentery, is an efficient diuretic, and is curative of cough, hardness of breathing, ruptures, and serpiginous affections. For diseases of the intestines and bladder, the leaves are taken in drink. It has the property also of reducing ruptures of the groin. The Greek writers describe another Hipparus, also with shorter tufts, softer and whiter. This last, they say, is remarkably good for sciatica, and applied with vinegar for wounds, it having the property of stanching the blood. Bruised nymphea is also applied to wounds. Pucatinum is taken in drink with cypress seed, for discharges of blood at the mouth or by the lower passages. Sideritis is possessed of such remarkable virtues, that applied to the wound of a gladiator just inflicted, it will stop the flow of blood, an effect which is equally produced by an application of charred phenolgiant, or of the ashes of that plant. For a similar purpose, also the fungus that is found growing near the root of the phenolgiant is still more efficacious. Chapter 84. Stephanomalus. For bleeding at the nostrils, seed of hemlock pounded in water is considered efficacious, as also Stephanomalus applied with water. Powdered betony, taken with goat's milk or bruised plantago, arrests discharges of blood from the mammae. Juice of plantago is administered to patients when vomiting blood. For local discharges of blood, an application of root of persillata with stale axle grease is highly spoken of. Chapter 85. Remedies for ruptures and convulsions. Erysipelas, 1 remedy. For ruptures, convulsions, and falls with violence, the greater centauri is used. Root of gentian pounded or boiled, juice of betony. This last being employed also for ruptures produced by straining the vocal organs or sides. Panaceas, scordium, or aristolochia taken in drink. For contusions and falls, agaric is taken in doses of 2 oboli and 3 scythe of honeyed wine, or if there are symptoms of fever, hydromel, the verbascum also with a golden flower, root of acoron, the several varieties of aosium, the juice of the larger kind being particularly efficacious, juice of symphytum, or a decoction of the root of that plant, daucus unboiled, Erysipelas, a plant with a yellow flower and a leaf like that of the acanthus, taken in wine. Chimerops aereo, taken in pottage. Plantago, taken anyway, as also. Chapter 86. Remedies for Psoriasis. Psoriasis is a disease which proved fatal to the dictator Sylla, and which develops itself by the production of insects in the blood, which ultimately consume the body. It is combated by using the juice of Timonian grapes or of hellebore, the body being rubbed all over with it in combination with oil. A decoction of Timonian grapes and vinegar has the effect also of ridding the clothes of these vermin. Chapter 87. Remedies for Ulcers and Wounds. Of ulcers, there are numerous kinds, which are treated in various ways. The root of all the varieties of Panaceas is used as an application for running ulcers in warm wine. That which we have spoken of as the Caronian is particularly good as a desiccative. Bruised with honey, it opens tumors and is useful for serpiginous ulcers, the cure of which appears more than doubtful, in which case it is amalgamated with flour of copper tempered with wine, either the seed, flour, or root be employed for the purpose. Mixed with polenta, it is good for old wounds. The following are also good detergents for wounds: Heraclean, Siderian, Apollinaris, Cilion, Tragacantha, and Scordotus mixed with honey. Powdered Scordotus applied by itself consumes fleshy excrescences on the body. Pulmonia is a curative of the malignant ulcer known as Cacoethes. The greater Centauri, sprinkled in powder, or applied in the form of a liniment, or the leaves of the smaller Centauri, boiled or pounded, act as a detergent upon inveterate ulcers and effect a cure. To recent wounds, the follicules of the Clymenus are applied. Gentian is applied to supergneous ulcers, the root being bruised or else boiled down in water to the consistency of honey. The juice also of the plant is employed. For wounds, a kind of lycium is prepared from gentian. Lysimachia is curative of recent wounds and plantago of all kinds of ulcerations, those on females, infants, and aged persons more particularly. This plant, when softened by the action of fire, is better still. In combination with curry, it acts as a detergent upon ulcers with indurated edges, and arrests the progress of corrosive sores. When applied bruised, it should be covered with its own leaves. Chelidonia also acts as a desiccative upon suppurations, abscesses, and fistulous ulcers. Indeed, it is so remarkably useful for the cure of wounds as to be employed as a substitute for spodium even. In cases where the cure is almost hopeless, it is applied with axle grease. Dittany, taken internally, causes arrows to fall from the flesh. Used as a liniment, it has the effect of extracting other kinds of pointed weapons. The leaves are taken in the proportion of 1 obolus to 1 cyathus of water. Nearly equal in its efficacy is a Pseudo-Dictamnon. They are both of them useful also for dispersing suppurations. Aristolochia cauterizes putrid sores and, applied with honey, acts as a detergent upon sordid ulcers. At the same time also, it removes maggots and extracts hard cores and all foreign bodies adhering to the flesh, arrows more particularly, and, applied with resin, splintered bones. Used by itself, it fills the cavities made by ulcers with new flesh, and, employed with iris, in vinegar, it closes recent wounds. Vervain, or cinquefoil with salt and honey, is remedial for ulcers of long standing. Roots of persillata are applied to recent wounds inflicted with iron, but for old wounds, it is the leaves that are employed. In both cases, in combination with axle grease, the sore being then covered with the leaves of the plant. Damasconium is used for wounds the same way as for Scrofula, and leaves of verbascum are employed with vinegar and wine. Vervain is useful for all kinds of callosities or putrid sores. Root of Nymphaea heraclea is curative of running ulcers, and the same is the case with root of cyclamenos, either used by itself or in combination with vinegar or honey. This last root is useful also for the cure of steatomatous tumors, and hyssop for that of running ulcers, an effect equally produced by Pucatinum, a plant which exercises so powerful an influence upon fresh wounds as to cause exfoliation even of the bones. The two varieties of Anagallus are possessed of similar properties, and act as a check upon the corrosive sores known as nome, and upon defluxions. They are useful also in cases of recent wounds, those of aged people in particular. Fresh leaves of mandragora, applied with carotene, are curative of apostomies and sordid ulcers. The root too is used, with honey or oil, for wounds. Hemlock, incorporated with flour of winter wheat by the agency of wine, as also the plant Izoam, is curative of herpetic eruptions and corrosive or putrid sores. Origeron is employed for ulcers which breed maggots. Root of astragalus is used for the cure of recent wounds or of ulcers of long standing, and upon these last, either kind of hypothesis acts as a detergent. Seed of Leontopodium, bruised in water and applied with polenta, extracts pointed weapons from the flesh, a result equally produced by using seed of Pycnocommon. The Tithimalus Harachais supplies its juice for the cure of gangrenes, phagedenic sores, and putrid ulcers, or else a decoction is made of the branches with polenta and oil. Roots of orchis have a similar effect, in addition to which, applied with either dry or fresh gathered, with honey and vinegar, they are curative of the ulcer known as cacoethes. Oenothera also, used by itself, is curative of ulcers when rapidly gaining head. The people of Scythia employ scythis for the treatment of wounds. For carcinoma, argamonia applied with honey is extremely efficacious. For sores that have prematurely closed, root of asphodel is boiled, in manner already stated, and then beaten up with polenta and applied. For all kinds of wounds, apollinaris is very useful. Root of astragalus, reduced to powder, is good for running ulcers. The same too with calothrix boiled in water. For blisters, more particularly when caused by the shoes, vervain is used, as also pounded lysimachia or nymphea dried and powdered, but when they have assumed the form of inveterate ulcers, polythrix will be found more serviceable. Chapter 88, Polynemon, 1 Remedy. Polynemon is a plant which resembles Cunilla bubula. It has a seed like that of pennyroyal, a ligneous stem with numerous articulations, and odoriferous umbels with a pleasant though pungent smell. This plant is chewed and applied to wounds inflicted with iron, the application being removed at the end of 4 days. Synphydin causes sores to cicatrize with the greatest rapidity. The same too with sideritis, which is applied in combination with honey. The seed and leaves of verbascum, boiled in wine and pounded, are used for the extraction of all foreign substances adhering to the body, and a similar use is made of the leaves of mandragora mixed with polenta and roots of cyclamenos with honey. Leaves of trixago bruised in oil are used for ulcers of serpiginous nature more particularly, as also seaweed bruised with honey. Betony, with the addition of salt, is employed for the cure of carcinomatous sores and inveterate blisters on the neck. Chapter 89, Remedies for warts and applications for the removal of scars. Argamonia with vinegar or root of batrachian removes warts, this last having the effect of also bringing off malformed nails. The juice or the leaves applied topically of either kind of Linozostis remove warts. All the varieties of Tithimalus are efficacious for the removal of every kind of wart, as also of hangnails and wens. Ladanum imparts a fresh color and seemly appearance to scars. The traveler who carries Artemisia attached to his person, or Elephantiasis, will never be sensible of lassitude, it is said. Chapter 90, Remedies for Female Diseases. One great remedy for all female diseases in common is the black seed of the herbaceous plant Paeonia, taken in hydromel. The root also is an effectual emmenagogue. Seed of Panaces, mixed with wormwood, acts as an emmenagogue and a sudorific. The same too with Scordotus, taken internally or applied topically. Betony, in doses of 1 drachma to 3 scythe of wine, is taken for various affections of the uterus, as also directly after childbirth. Excessive menstruation is arrested by a pessary of Achille, or else a sitting bath composed of a decoction of that plant. Seed of henbane in wine is used as a liniment for diseases of the mammae, and the root is employed in the form of a plaster for uterine affections. Cheladonia too is applied to the mammae. Roots of Panaces, applied as a pessary, bring away the afterbirth and the dead fetus, and the plant itself, taken in wine, are used as a pessary with honey, acts as a detergent upon the uterus. Polymonia, taken in wine, brings away the afterbirth. Used as a fumigation, it is good for suffocations of the uterus. Juice of the smaller centauri, taken in drink, or employed as a fomentation, acts as an emagogue. The root also of the larger centauri, similarly used, is good for pains in the uterus. Scraped and used as a pessary, it expels the dead fetus. For pains of the uterus, plantago is applied as a pessary in wool, and for hysterical suffocations, it is taken in drink. But it is dittany that is of the greatest efficacy in cases of this description. It acts as an emmenagogue and is an expellant of the fetus when dead or lying transversely in the uterus. In these cases, the leaves of it are taken in doses of 1 obolus in water. Indeed, so active is it in its effects that ordinarily it is forbidden to be introduced into the chamber of a woman lying in. Not only is it thus efficacious when taken in drink, but even when applied topically are used as a fumigation. Pseudo-Dictamnon possesses pretty nearly the same virtues, but it acts as an emmenagogue also. Boiled in doses of 1 denarius in unmixed wine. Aristolochia, however, is employed for a greater number of purposes. In combination with myrrh and pepper, either taken in drink or used as a pessary, it acts as a powerful emmenagogue, and brings away the dead fetus and the afterbirth. This plant, the smaller kind in particular, used either as a fomentation, fumigation, or pessary, acts as a preventative of procedence of the uterus. Hysterical suffocations and irregularities of the catamenia are treated with agaric, taken in doses of 3 oboli in 1 cyathus of old wine. Vervain is used also in similar cases as a pessary with fresh hog's lard, or else antirrhinum with rose oil and honey. Root of Thessalia nymphea used as a pessary is curative of pains in the uterus. Taken in red wine, it arrests uterine discharges. Root of Cyclamenos, on the other hand, taken in drink and employed as a pessary, acts as an emmenagogue. A decoction of it, used as a sitting bath, cures affections of the bladder. Sisanthemos, taken in drink, brings away the afterbirth, and is curative of diseases of the uterus. The upper part of the root Xiphian, taken in doses of 1 drachma in vinegar, promotes menstruation. A fumigation of burnt pucatinum has a soothing effect in cases of hysterical suffocation. Psyllium, taken in the proportion of 1 drachma to 3 cyathi of hydromel, is particularly good for promoting the lochial discharge. Seed of mandragora, taken in drink, acts as a detergent upon the uterus. The juice, employed in a pessary, promotes menstruation and expels the dead fetus. The seed of this plant, used with live sulfur, arrests menstruation when in excess, while batrachian, on the other hand, acts as an emmenagogue. This last plant is either used as an article of food or is taken in drink. In a raw state, as already stated, it has a burning flavor, but when cooked, the taste of it is greatly improved by the addition of salt, oil, and cumin. Daucus, taken in drink, promotes the catamenia, and is an expellant of the afterbirth in a very high degree. Ladanum, used as a fumigation, acts as a corrective upon the uterus, and is employed topically for pains and ulcerations of that organ. Scammony, taken in drink or used as a pessary, is an expellant of the dead fetus. Either kind of hypericon, used as a pessary, promotes menstruation, but for this purpose it is crethmos. According to Hippocrates, that is the most efficacious, the seed or root of it being taken in wine. Of the outer coat brings away the afterbirth. This plant, taken in water, is good for hysterical suffocations. Root of geranium also, which is particularly useful for the afterbirth, and for inflation of the uterus. Hippurus, taken in drink or applied as a pessary, acts as a detergent upon the uterus. Polygonos, taken in drink, promotes menstruation, and the same with root of alchema. Leaves of plantago and agaric and hydromel have a similar effect. Artemisia, bruised and applied as a pessary, with oil of iris, figs, or myrrh, is curative of diseases of the uterus. The root, too, of this plant, taken in drink, is so strongly purgative as to expel the dead fetus even. A decoction of the branches, used as a sitting bath, promotes menstruation and brings away the afterbirth. The same, too, with the leaves, taken in doses of 1 drachma in drink. The leaves, if applied to the lower regions of the abdomen with barley meal, will prove equally efficacious. Acoron is very useful for internal complaints of females. as also the 2 varieties of Coniza and Crethmos. Either kind of Anthillis, taken in wine, is remarkably good for uterine affections, gripping pains in that organ, and retardations of the afterbirth. Calothrix, applied as a fomentation, is curative of affections of the vagina. It removes scaly eruptions also of the head, and, beaten up in oil, it stains the hair. Geranium, taken in white wine, or hypocythus in red, arrests all uterine discharges. Hyssop modifies hysterical suffocations. Root of vervain, taken in water, is a most excellent remedy for all accidents incident to, or consequent upon, delivery. Some persons mix bruised cypress seed with puccatinum in red wine. Seed, too, of Psyllium, boiled in water and taken warm, has a soothing effect upon all defluxions of the uterus. Symphyton, bruised in wine, promotes menstruation. Juice of Scordotus, in the proportion of 1 drachma to 4 scythe of hydromel, accelerates delivery. Leaves of dittany are given for the same purpose, in water, with remarkable success. It is a well-known fact, too, that these leaves, to the extent of a single obolus even, will bring away the fetus instantaneously, even when dead, without the slightest inconvenience to the patient. Pseudo-Dictamnon is productive of a somewhat similar effect, but not in so marked a degree. Cyclamenos, too, attached as an amulet, Chrysanthemos, taken in drink, and powdered betony in hydromel. Chapter 91. Arsinogenin, 1 medical property. Thaligonin, 1 medical property. Arsinogenin and thaligonin are plants, both of them with clusters resembling the blossoms of the olive, but paler, and a white seed like that of the poppy. By taking thaligonin in drink, they say, a conception of the female issue is ensured. Arsinogenin differs from it in the seed, which resembles that of the olive, but in no other respect. By taking this last plant in drink, male issue may be ensured, that is, if we choose to believe it. Some persons, however, assert that both plants resemble ocimum, but that the seed of arsinogenin is double, and resembles the testes in appearance. Chapter 92. Mastus, 1 remedy. Izoam, which we have spoken of under the name of digitalis, is the great specific for diseases of the mammae. The milk is increased by taking origeron in raisin wine, or else sonkos boiled with spelt. The plant known as mastos, applied topically, removes the hairs from the mammae, which make their appearance after childbirth. It has the effect also of dispersing scaly crusts upon the face and other cutaneous affections. Gentian also, Nymphea heraclea employed in a liniment, and root of cyclamenos, removes all blemishes of the skin. Seeds of cacalia, mixed with melted wax, plump out the skin of the face and make wrinkles disappear. Root of acoron also removes all spots upon the skin. Chapter 93. Applications for the hair. Lysimachia ophrys. Lysimachia imparts a blonde tint to the hair, and the hypericon, otherwise called coricin, makes it black. The same too with ophrys, a plant with indentations, which resembles the cabbage, but has only 2 leaves. Polymonia, too, boiled in oil, imparts blackness to the hair. As for depilatories, I reckon them in the number of cosmetics, fit for women only, though men use them nowadays. For this purpose, Archizostis is looked upon as highly efficacious, as also the juice of Tithimalus, applied with oil every now and then in the sun, or after pulling out the hairs. Hyssop, applied with oil, heals itch scab in beasts, and sideritis is particularly useful for quinsy in swine. But let us now turn to the remaining plants of which we have to speak. Summary. Remedies, Narratives, and Observations 1019. Roman authors quoted: M. Varro, C. Valgius, Pompeius Linnaeus, Sextius Niger, who wrote in Greek, Julius Bassus, who wrote in Greek, Antonius Castor, Cornelius Celsus. Foreign authors quoted: Theophrastus, Democritus, Juba, Orpheus, Pythagoras, Mago, Menander, who wrote the Biocresta, Nicander, Homer, Hesiod, Musaeus, Sophocles, Xanthus, Anaxylus. Medical authors quoted: Mnestheus, Callimachus, Phanias the physician, Timoristus, Simus, Hippocrates, Chrysippus, Diocles, Ophelion, Heraclides, Hecesius, Dionysius, Apollodorus of Citium, Apollodorus of Tarentum, Praxagoras, Plistonicus, Medius, Diuces, Cleophantus, Philistian, Asclepiedes, Craduus, Petronius Diodotus, Aeolus, Aristristitus, Diagoras, Andreas, Nicides, Epicharmus, Damian, Tlepolemus, Metrodorus, Solo, Lycus, Olympias of Thebes, Philinus, Patricus, Micton, Glaucius, Xenocrates. End of Section 4.
Section 5 of the Natural History, Volume 6. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Natural History, Volume 6, by Pliny the Elder, translated by John Bostock and Henry Thomas Riley. Section 5, Book 27, Chapters 1 to 23. Chapter 1. 1. Researches of the ancients upon this subject. The further I proceed in this work, the more I am impressed with admiration of the ancients, and the greater the number of plants that remain to be described, the more I am induced to venerate the zeal displayed by the men of former times in their researches, and the kindly spirit manifested by them in transmitting to us the results thereof. Indeed, their bounteousness in this respect would almost seem to have surpassed the munificent disposition even of nature herself, if our knowledge of plants had depended solely upon man's spirit of discovery. But as it is evident beyond all doubt that this knowledge has emanated from the gods themselves, or at all events has been the result of divine inspiration, even in those cases where man has been instrumental in communicating it to us. In other words, if we must confess the truth, a marvel surpassed by nothing in our daily experience, nature herself, that common parent of all things, has at once produced them, and has discovered to us their properties. Wondrous indeed is it that a Scythian plant should be brought from the shores of the Palus Meotis and the Euphobia, from Mount Atlas and the regions beyond the Pillars of Hercules, localities where the operations of nature have reached their utmost limit, that in another direction the plant Britannica should be conveyed to us from isles of the ocean situate beyond the confines of the earth, that the Ethiopus should reach us from a climate scorched by the luminaries of heaven, and then, in addition to all this, that there should be a perpetual interchange going on between all parts of the earth of productions so instrumental to the welfare of mankind. Results, all of them, ensured to us by the peace that reigns under the majestic sway of the Roman power, a peace which brings in presence of each other not individuals only, belonging to lands and nations far separate, but mountains even, and heights towering above the clouds, their plants and their various productions. That this great bounteousness of the gods may know no end is my prayer, a bounteousness which seemed to have granted the Roman sway as a second luminary for the benefit of mankind. Chapter 2. 2. Aconite, otherwise called Theliphonon, Cameron, Pardaliaces, or Scorpio, 4 remedies. But who, I say, can sufficiently venerate the zeal and spirit of research displayed by the ancients? It is they who have shown us that aconite is the most prompt of all poisons in its effects, so much so indeed that female animals, if the sexual parts are but touched with it, will not survive a single day. With this poison it was that Caecilius accused Calpurnius Bestia of killing his wives in their sleep, and this it was that gave rise to that fearful peroration of his denouncing the murderous finger of the accused. According to the fables of mythology, this plant was originally produced from the foam of the dog Cerberus when dragged by Hercules from the infernal regions, for which reason it is said it is still so remarkably abundant in the vicinity of Heraclea in Pontus, a spot where the entrance is still pointed out to the shades below. And yet, noxious as it is, the ancients have shown us how to employ aconite for the benefit of mankind, and have taught us, as the result of their experience, that taken in mulled wine, it neutralizes the venom of the scorpion. Indeed, such is the nature of this deadly plant, that it kills man unless it can find in man something else to kill. When such is the case, as though it had discovered in the body a fit rival to contend with, that substance is the sole object of its attack. Finding another poison in the viscera, to it alone it confines its onslaught. And thus a truly marvellous thing. 2 poisons, each of them of a deadly nature, destroy one another within the body, and the man survives. Even more than this, the ancients have handed down to us remedies employed by the animals themselves, and have shown how that venomous creatures even effect their own cure. By the contact of aconite, the scorpion is struck with torpor, is quite benumbed, assumes a pallid hue, and so confesses itself vanquished. When this is the case, white hellebore is its great auxiliary. The very touch of it dispels its torpor, and the aconite is forced to yield before 2 foes, its own enemy and the common enemy of all. Now after this, if any one should be of opinion that man could, by any chance or possibility, make such discoveries as these, he must surely be guilty of ingratitude, in thus appreciating the beneficence of the gods. In countries frequented by the panther, they rub meat with aconite, and if one of those animals should but taste it, its effects are fatal. Indeed, were not these means adopted, the country would soon be overrun by them. It is for this reason, too, that some persons have given to hellebore the name of par d'Aleancus. It has been well ascertained, however, that the panther instantaneously recovers if it can find the opportunity of eating human ordure. So far as these animals are concerned, who can entertain a doubt that it was chance only that first led them to this discovery, and that as often as this happens, the discovery is only a mere repetition of the accident, there being neither reason nor an appreciation of experience to ensure its transmission among them. 3. It is chance, yes, it is chance that is the deity who has made to us these numerous revelations for our practical benefit, always understanding that under this name we mean nature, that great parent and mistress of all things, and this is evident whether we come to the conclusion that these wild beasts make the discovery from day to day, or that they are gifted from the first with these powers of perception. Regarded in another point of view, it really is a disgrace that all animated beings should have an exact knowledge of what is beneficial to them, with the exception of man. The ancients, openly professing their belief that there is no evil without some admixture of good, have asserted that aconite is a remarkably useful ingredient in the compositions for the eyes. It may therefore be permitted me, though I have hitherto omitted a description of the poisonous plants, to point out the characteristics of aconite, if only that it may be the more easily detected. Aconite has leaves like those of Cyclaminus, or of the cucumber, never more than 4 in number, slightly hairy, and rising from near the root. This root, which is moderate size, resembles the sea fish known as the Camarus, a circumstance owing to which the plant has received the name of Cameron from some, while others, for the reason already mentioned, have called it Telephonon. The root is slightly curved like a scorpion's tail, for which reason some persons have given it the name of Scorpio. Others, again, have preferred giving it the name of Myoctonon, from the fact that the odor of it kills mice at a considerable distance even. This plant is found growing upon the naked rocks known as Aconi, and hence it is, according to some authorities, that it is called aconitum, there being not so much as dust even about it to conduce to its nutriment. Such is the reason given for its name by some, but according to others it receives its appellation from the fact that it fatally exercises the same effects upon the body that the whetstone does upon the edge of iron, being no sooner employed than its effects are felt. Chapter 3:4 Ethiopus. 4 Remedies. Ethiopus is a plant with leaves resembling those of Phlomis, large, numerous, hairy, and springing from the root. The stem is square, rough, similar to that of Arctium in appearance, and with numerous axillary concavities. The seed resembles that of the fitch, being white and twofold. The roots are several in number, long, fleshy, soft, and of a viscous taste. When dry, they turn black and hard, and might easily be taken for horns. In addition to Ethiopia, this plant grows upon Mount Ida, in Troas, and in Messenia. The roots are gathered in autumn, and left to dry for some days in the sun, to prevent them from turning mouldy. Taken in white wine, they are curative of affections of the uterus, and a decoction of them is administered for sciatica, pleurisy, and eruptions of the throat. The kind, however, which comes from Ethiopia is by far the best, and gives instantaneous relief. Chapter 4 Agariton. 4 Remedies. Agariton is a ferulaceous plant, a couple of palms in height, similar to origanum in appearance, and bearing flowers like balls of gold. Used as a fumigation, this plant acts as a diuretic and as a detergent upon the uterus, when used in a sitting bath more particularly. Its name has been given to it from the circumstance that it keeps a very long time without fading. Chapter 5 The Aloe. 29 Remedies. The aloe bears a resemblance to the squill, except that it is larger and has more substantial leaves, with streaks running obliquely. The stem is tender, red in the middle, and not unlike that of the anthericus. It has a single root, which runs straight downwards, like a stake driven into the ground. Its smell is powerful, and it has a bitter taste. The most esteemed aloes are those imported from India, but it grows in the Asiatic provinces as well. This last kind, however, is never used, except that the leaves are applied fresh to wounds. Indeed, these leaves, as well as the juice, are glutinous to a marvelous degree, and it is for this property that it is grown in vessels of a conical form, in the same way as the greater Izum. Some persons make incisions in the stem to obtain the juice before the seed is ripe, while others again make them in the leaves as well. Tear-like drops are also found adhering to it, which exude spontaneously. Hence it is that some recommend that the place should be paved where it is grown, to prevent this juice from being absorbed. Some authors have stated that there is found in Judea, beyond Hierosolima, a mineral alloy, but that is, it is inferior to the other kinds, being of a darker color and more humid than any of the rest. Aloes of the finest quality should be unctuous and shining, of a red color, brittle, compact like the substance of liver, and easily liquefied. That which is hard and black should be rejected, the same too when it is mixed with sand or adulterated with gum and acacia, a fraud which may be easily detected by the taste. This plant is of an astringent nature, binding and slightly calorific. It is employed for numerous purposes, but principally as a purgative, it being almost the only one of all the medicaments which produce that effect, that is at the same time a good stomachic, and does not exercise the slightest noxious influence upon the stomach. It is taken in doses of 1 drachma, and in cases of derangement of the stomach, it is administered 2 or 3 times a day, in the proportion of 1 spoonful to 2 caiathi of warm or cold water at intervals, according to the nature of the emergency. As a purgative, it is mostly taken in doses of 3 drachmae, and it operates still more efficaciously if food is eaten directly afterwards. Used with astringent wine, it prevents the hair from falling off, the head being rubbed with it the contrary way of the hair in the sun, applied to the temples and forehead with rose oil and vinegar, or used as an infusion in a more diluted form, it allays headache. It is generally agreed that it is remedial for all diseases of the eyes, but more particularly for prurigo and scaly eruptions of the eyelids, as also for marks and bruises, applied in combination with honey, Pontic honey in particular. It is employed also for affections of the tonsillary glands and gums, for all ulcerations of the mouth, and for spitting of blood, if not in excess, the proper dose being 1 drachma, taken in water or else vinegar. Used by itself or in combination with vinegar, it arrests hemorrhage, whether proceeding from wounds or from other causes. In addition to these properties, it is extremely efficacious for the cure of wounds, producing cicatrization very rapidly. It is sprinkled also upon ulcerations of the male organs, and is applied to condylomata and chaps of the fundament, either in common wine, raisin wine, or by itself in a dry state, according as a mollifying or restrictive treatment is required. It has the effect also of gently arresting hemorrhoidal bleeding when in excess. In cases of dysentery, it is used as an injection where the digestion is imperfect. It is taken shortly after the evening meal. For jaundice, it is administered in doses of 3 oboli in water. As a purgative for the bowels, it is taken in pills with boiled honey or turpentine. It is good also for the removal of hangnails. When employed in ophthalmic preparations, it is first washed, that the more gravelly portions of it may subside, or else it is put over the fire in a pipkin, and stirred with a feather from time to time, that the whole of it may be equally warmed. Chapter 6. Alcea. One remedy. Alcea is a plant with leaves resembling those of vervain, known also as persterion, some 3 or 4 stems covered with leaves, a flower like that of the rose, and white roots at most 6 in number, a cubit in length, and running obliquely. It grows in a soil that is rich without being dry. The root is given in wine or water for dysentery, diarrhea, ruptures, and convulsions. Chapter 7. The Alapon. One remedy. The Alapon has a small stem with a soft head, and is not unlike beet in appearance. It has an acrid, viscous taste, extremely pungent and burning. Taken in hydromel with a little salt, it acts as a purgative. The smallest dose is 2 drachmae, a moderate dose 4, and the largest 6. When used as a purgative, it is taken in chicken broth. Chapter 8. Alcine, a plant used for the same purposes as helcine. 5 remedies. Alcine, a plant known as myoceton. To some grows in the woods, to which, in fact, it is indebted for its name of Alcine. It begins to make its appearance at midwinter and withers in the middle of summer. When it first puts forth, the leaves bear a strong resemblance to the ears of mice. We shall have occasion, however, to speak of another plant, which may with much more justice be called myosotis. As for Alcine, it would be the same thing as helcine, were it not that it is smaller and not so hairy. It grows in gardens and upon walls more particularly. When rubbed, it emits a smell like that of cucumber. It is used for abscesses, inflammations, and all those purposes for which helcine is employed. Its properties, however, are not so active. It is applied topically also to defluxions of the eyes, and to sores upon the generative organs, and ulcerations with barley meal. The juice is used as an injection for the ears. Chapter 9. The Androsaces. 6 remedies. The Androsaces is a white plant, bitter, without leaves, and bearing arms surmounted with follicules containing the seed. It grows in the maritime parts of Syria. More particularly, this plant is administered for dropsy in doses of 2 drachmae, pounded or boiled in either water, wine, or vinegar. It acts most powerfully as a diuretic. It is used also for gout, either taken internally or used as a liniment. The seed is possessed of similar properties. Chapter 10. Androsemen, or ascyren. 6 remedies. Androsemen, or as some persons call it, ascyren, is not unlike hypericon, a plant of which we have spoken already. The stems, however, are larger, redder, and lie more closely together. The leaves are of a white color, and like those of rue in shape. The seed resembles that of the black poppy, and the upper branches, when bruised, emit a red juice the color of blood. These branches have also a resinous smell. This plant grows in vineyards, and it is usually in the middle of autumn that it is taken up and hung to dry. Used as a purgative, it is bruised with the seed and taken in the morning or just after the evening meal in doses of 2 drachmae in hydromel, wine or pure water, the draught amounting to 1 sextarius in all. It carries off bile and is particularly good for sciatica, but in this last case caper root must be taken with resin the day after, the dose being 1 drachma, to be repeated every 4 days. After being purged, it is the practice for the patient, if in robust health, to take wine, but if in a weak state of body, water. It is employed topically also for gout, burns, and wounds, as it tends to arrest the flow of blood. Chapter 11. Ambrosia, Botrytis, or Artemisia. 3 remedies. Ambrosia is a vague name which has fluctuated between various plants. There is one, however, which has been more particularly designated by this appellation, a branchy shrub-like plant with a thin stem, some 3 palms in height. The root of it is 1/3 shorter, and the leaves towards the lower part of the stem resemble those of rue. Its diminutive branches bear a seed which hangs down in clusters and has a vinous smell. Hence it is that by some persons the plant is called Botrytis, while to others it is known as Artemisia. The people of Cappadocia use it for garlands. It is employed in medicine as a resolvent. Chapter 12. The Ananas, or Ononis. 5 remedies. The ananas, by some called Ononis in preference, is a branchy plant, and similar to fenugreek in appearance, except that it is more shrub-like and more hairy. It has an agreeable smell, and becomes prickly after spring. It is pickled in brine for eating. Applied fresh to ulcers, it cauterizes the margins of them. For the cure of toothache, the root is boiled in oxycrate, taken in drink with honey. The root expels urinary calculi. For epilepsy, it is administered in oxymel, boiled down to 1/2. Chapter 13. The Anagarus, or Acapon. 3 remedies. The Anagarus, known to some by the name of Acapon, is a shrub-like plant with an offensive smell and a blossom like that of the cabbage. The seed grows in small horn-like pods of considerable length and resembles a kidney in shape. It hardens about the time of harvest. The leaves of this plant are applied to gatherings and are attached to the person in cases of difficult parturition, care being taken to remove them the moment after delivery. In cases where the extraction of the dead fetus is attended with difficulty, or where the afterbirth or catamenia are retarded, the leaves are taken in doses of 1 drachma in raisin wine. The leaves are administered in the same manner for asthma. They are prescribed also in old wine for injuries inflicted by the phalangium. The root is employed medicinally as a resolvent and maturative. The seed chewed acts as an emetic. Chapter 14. The Anonymous. 2 remedies. The Anonymous, through not having a name, has at last found one. It is brought from Scythia, and has been highly extolled by Cassius, a physician of no small repute, as also by Aristogiton. Bruised in water and applied, it is remarkably useful for wounds, and taken in drink it is good for blows upon the chest or mammally, as also for spitting of blood. It has been thought too that it might be advantageously taken in a potion for wounds. I am of opinion that the additional statement to the effect that burnt fresh it acts as a solder to iron or copper is wholly fabulous. Chapter 15.5. Aperine, Amphilocarpus, or Philanthropus. 3 remedies. Aperine, otherwise called Amphilocarpus or Philanthropus, is a ramose, hairy plant with 5 or 6 leaves at regular intervals arranged circularly around the branches. The seed is round, hard, concave, and of a sweetish taste. It grows in cornfields, gardens, and meadows, and by the aid of its prickly points adheres to the clothes. The seed is employed to neutralize the venom of serpents, being taken in doses of 1 drachma in wine. It is useful also for the bite of the phalangium. The leaves, applied topically, arrest hemorrhage from wounds. The juice is used as an injection for the ears. Chapter 16. The Arction, or Arcturum. 5 remedies. The Arction is by some called Arcturum in preference. The leaves of it are like those of verbascum, except that they are more hairy. The stem is long and soft, and the seed resembles that of cumin. It grows in rocky localities and has a tender root, white and sweet. A decoction of it is made with wine for toothache, being retained for that purpose in the mouth. The plant is taken in drink for sciatica and strangury, and is applied with wine to burns and chilblains, which are fomented also with the root and seed bruised in wine. Chapter 17. The Asplanon, or Hermionion. 2 remedies. Some persons call the Asplanon by the name of Hermionion. It has numerous leaves, a third of a foot in length, and a slimy root, pierced with holes like that of fern, white and hairy. It is destitute of stem, flower, and seed, and is found growing upon rocks or sheltered damp walls. The most approved kind is that of Crete. A decoction of the leaves in vinegar, taken in drink for a period of 30 days, will consume the spleen, it is said, the leaves being applied simultaneously. The leaves give relief also in hiccup. This plant should never be given to females, being productive of sterility. Chapter 18. The Asclepiedes. 2 remedies. The Asclepiedes has leaves like those of ivy, long branches, and numerous roots, thin and odoriferous. The flower has a strong offensive smell, and the seed is like that of Securidaca. It is found growing in mountainous districts. The roots are used for the cure of griping pains in the bowels, and of stings inflicted by serpents, either taken in drink or applied topically. Chapter 19. The Aster, or Bubonian. 3 remedies. The aster is called Bubonian by some from the circumstance of its being a sovereign remedy for diseases of the groin. It has a diminutive stem with oblong leaves, 2 or 3 in number, and at the summit it is surmounted with small radiated heads like stars. This plant is taken also in drink as an antidote to the venom of serpents, but if required for the cure of inguinal complaints, it is recommended that it should be gathered with the left hand and attached to the body near the girdle. It is of great service also, worn as an amulet for sciatica. Chapter 20. Ascyron and Ascyroides. 3 remedies. Ascyron and Ascyroides are plants similar to one another and to Hypericon as well, except that the plant known as Ascyroides has larger branches, ferrulaceous, red all over, and bearing small yellow heads. The seed, enclosed in small calices, is diminutive, black, and resinous. The tops of the branches, when bruised, stain like blood, for which reason some persons have given it the name of androsemen. The seed is used for the cure of sciatica, being taken in doses of 2 drachmae in 1 sectarius of hydromel. It relaxes the bowels and carries off bile. It is applied also to burns. Chapter 21. The Alfalfa. 3 remedies. The alfalfa has remarkably diminutive leaves. It is but little taller than the lentil. The pods are of a larger size and enclose some 3 or 4 seeds of a darker color, moister and more diminutive than those of the lentil. It grows in cultivated fields. It is naturally more astringent than the lentil, but in other respects is applied to much the same purposes. The seed used in a decoction arrests fluxes of the stomach and bowels. Chapter 22. Alcybium. 1 remedy. I have not found it stated by authors what kind of plant Alcybium is, but the root I find and the leaves are pounded and employed, both externally and internally, for injuries inflicted by serpents. When the leaves are used, a handful of them is bruised in 3 kyathi of undiluted wine. The root is employed in the proportion of 3 drachmae to the same quantity of wine. Chapter 23. Alectoroslophus, or Christa. 2 remedies. Alectoroslophus, or Christa as we call it, has numerous leaves resembling a cock's comb, a thin stem, and a black seed enclosed in pods. Boiled with broken beans and honey, it is useful for cough and for films upon the eyes. The seed too is sprinkled whole into the eyes, and so far is it from injuring them that it attracts and collects the filmy matter. When thus used, it changes color, and from black becomes white, gradually swells and comes out of itself. End of section 5. Section 6. of the Natural History, Volume 6. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Natural History, Volume 6 by Pliny the Elder, translated by John Bostock and Henry Thomas Riley. Section 6, Book 27, Chapters 24 to 56. Chapter 24, 6. Alum, also called Symphyton, Patreon. 14. Remedies. The plant which we call alum, and which is known to the Greeks as Symphyton, Patreon, is similar to Conilla bubula in appearance, having a diminutive leaf and 3 or 4 branches springing from the root, with tops like those of thyme. It is a ligneous plant, odoriferous, of a sweet flavor, and provocative of saliva. The root of it is long and red. It grows upon rocks, to which circumstance it is indebted for its additional name of Patreon, and is extremely useful for affections of the sides and kidneys, griping pains in the bowels, diseases of the chest and lungs, spitting of blood, and eruptions of the fauces. The root is pounded and taken in drink, or else a decoction is made of it in wine. Sometimes also it is applied externally. Chewed, it allays thirst and is particularly refreshing to the pulmonary organs. It is employed topically for sprains and contusions, and has a soothing effect upon the intestines. Cooked upon hot ashes with the follicules removed, and then beaten up with 9 peppercorns and taken in water, it acts astringently upon the bowels. For the cure of wounds, it is remarkably efficacious, being possessed of agglutinating properties to such a remarkable degree as to solder pieces of meat together with which it is boiled, to which in fact it is indebted for its Greek name. It is used also for the cure of fractured bones. Chapter 25, 7. Alga rufa, or red seaweed. 1 remedy. Red seaweed is useful as an application for the sting of the scorpion. Chapter 26, Actea. 1 remedy. Actea has leaves with a powerful smell, rough knotted stems, a black seed like that of ivy, and soft berries. It grows in umbrageous, rugged, watery localities, and is used in doses of 1 full acetabulum for female complaints. Chapter 27, the Ampullus agria, or wild vine. 4 remedies. Ampullus agria, or wild vine, is the name of a plant with leaves of an ashy color, as already stated in our description of the cultivated plants, and long tough twigs of a red hue, like that of the flower which we have mentioned when speaking of violets under the name of flame of Jove. It bears a seed which resembles the grains of a pomegranate. The root, boiled in 3 caiathi of water, with the addition of 2 caiathi of Cohen wine, is slightly laxative to the bowels, and is consequently given for dropsy. It is curative also of uterine affections and of spots upon the face in females. It is found a good plant for patients afflicted with sciatica to use the juice of this plant, bruised, applied topically with the leaves. Chapter 28, Absinthium, or wormwood. 4 varieties, 48 remedies. There are numerous kinds of absinthium. The Santonic, for instance, so called from a city in Gaul, and the Pontic, which comes from Pontus, where the cattle are fattened upon it, a diet which causes them to be destitute of gall. The Pontic wormwood, we may remark, is of the finest quality, superior to that of Italy, and much more bitter. The pith, however, of the Pontic wormwood is sweet. As to its general utility, a plant so commonly found, and applied to such numerous uses, people are universally agreed, but with the Romans more particularly, it has been always held in the highest esteem from the fact of its being employed in their religious ceremonials. Thus, for instance, upon the Latin festival, it is the custom to have a race of 4-horsed chariots in the Capitol, and for the conqueror to be presented with a draught of wormwood. from the circumstance, no doubt, that our forefathers were of opinion that good health was the most valuable reward they could bestow upon his skill. This plant is very strengthening to the stomach, and hence it is that wines are flavored with it, as already stated. A decoction of it in water is also taken, the following being the method employed in preparing it. 6 drachmae of the leaves are boiled, with the branches, and 3 sextarii of rain water, and the preparation is then left to cool in the open air a day and a night. Salt, too, should be added to it. When old, it is utterly useless. A dilution of wormwood steeped in water is also used, such being the name given to this method of preparing it. This dilution is made by leaving the vessel covered up for 3 days, any kind of water being used. Pounded wormwood is but rarely employed, and the same with the extracted juice of the seed. In cases, however, where it is extracted, the seed is subjected to pressure as soon as it begins to swell, after which it is soaked for 3 days in water, if used fresh, and 7 if dry. It is then boiled in a copper vessel in the proportion of 10 haemoni to 45 sextarii of water, after which it is strained off and boiled gently to the consistency of honey, in the same way as the juice is extracted from the smaller centauri. The juice, however, of wormwood thus extracted is bad for the head and stomach, whereas the decoction, on the other hand, is wholesome in the highest degree, as it acts astringently upon the stomach, carries off bile, is a powerful diuretic, has a soothing effect upon the bowels, and assuages pains in the intestines. With the addition of sile, Gallic nard, and a little vinegar, it dispels nausea and flatulency, and expels intestinal worms. It removes squeamishness, promotes the digestion, and with the addition of rue, pepper, and salt, disperses crudities of the stomach. The ancients were in the habit of giving wormwood as a purgative, the dose being 6 drachmae of the seed with 3 of salt, and 1 cyanthus of honey in 1 sectarius of sea water, kept for some time. This preparation, however, is rendered more efficacious by doubling the proportion of salt. The seed, too, must be bruised with the greatest care, as there is considerable difficulty in pounding it. Some authorities have prescribed the dose above mentioned to be given in polenta, with the addition of pennyroyal, while others recommend the leaves to be given to children in a dried fig to disguise their bitterness. Taken with iris, wormwood acts as a detergent upon the thoracic organs. For jaundice it is used raw, with parsley or adiantum. In cases of flatulency it is sipped every now and then, warmed in water. For liver complaints it is taken with Gallic nard, and for diseases of the spleen with vinegar, pap, or figs. Taken in vinegar, it neutralizes the bad effects of fungi and of viscus. In wine it is an antidote to the poison of hemlock and to the bite of the shrew mouse, and is curative of wounds inflicted by the sea dragon and the scorpion. It contributes also very greatly to the improvement of the sight, and is used as an external application with raisin wine for deflections of the eyes, and with honey for bruises. The stream of decoction of wormwood is curative of affections of the ears, and when they are attacked with running sores, a liniment of wormwood bruised with honey is applied. 3 or 4 sprigs of wormwood, with 1 root of Gallic nard, taken in 6 cyathea of water, act as a diuretic and as an emmenagogue. Indeed, if taken with honey, or employed as a passeri with wool, it has the special virtues as an emmenagogue. In combination with honey and nitre it is useful for quinsy, and an infusion of it in water is good for epinitis. A topical application is made of it for recent wounds, provided always they have not been touched with water. It is employed also for ulcers upon the head. In combination with Cyprian wax or figs, it is highly recommended as a plaster for the iliac regions. It is curative also of prurigo, but it must never be administered in fevers. Taken in drink, it is a preventive of seasickness, and worn attached to the body beneath an apron. It arrests inguinal swellings. The smell of it induces sleep, a similar effect being produced by placing it under the pillow, unknown to the party. Kept among clothes, it preserves them from worms, and used as a liniment, with oil or burnt as a fumigation, it has the effect of driving away gnats. Writing ink, mixed with an infusion of wormwood, effectually protects the writings from the attacks of mice. Ashes of wormwood mixed with rose unguent stain the hair black. Chapter 29. Absinthium marinum, or seraphim. There is a sea wormwood, also known as the seraphim by some, the most esteemed being that of Taposiris in Egypt. Those initiated in the mysteries of Isis carry a branch of it in the hand. It has a narrower leaf than the preceding plant, and is not so bitter. It is injurious to the stomach, has a laxative effect upon the bowels, and expels intestinal worms. It is taken in drink with oil and salt, or else an infusion of it is taken in a pottage made of meal of 3-month wheat. When employed as a decoction, a handful is used to 1 sextarius of water, the mixture being boiled down to 1/2. Chapter 38. The Ballots Melamprasian, or black leek. 3 remedies. The Greeks give to the ballots the other name of melamprasian, meaning black leek. It is a branchy plant with black angular stems covered with hairy leaves, larger and darker than those of the leek, and possessed of a powerful smell. The leaves, bruised and applied with salt, are highly efficacious for bites inflicted by dogs. Cooked upon hot ashes and applied in a cabbage leaf, they are curative of condylomata. Mixed with honey, this plant acts as a detergent upon sordid ulcers. Chapter 31. Botrys ambrosia, or artemisia. 1 remedy. Botrys is a shrub-like plant, which has small yellow branches with the seed growing all round them, and leaves resembling those of endive. It is found upon the banks of running streams, and is used for the cure of hardness of breathing. The people of Cappadocia call this plant ambrosia, others again artemisia. Chapter 32. The Brabila. 1 remedy. The Brabila is possessed of astringent properties like those of the quince, but beyond this authors give no particulars relative to it. Chapter 33. Byron maritimum. 5 remedies. See, Bryan is plant, no doubt, with leaves like those of the lettuce, of a wrinkled, pursed appearance, and destitute of stem, the leaves arising from a single root. It grows upon rocks more particularly, and shells sunk in the sand. It has desiccative and astringent qualities in a very high degree, properties which render it useful for reducing all kinds of abscesses and inflammations, those attendant upon gout. In particular, it is good also for all affections which stand in need of cooling applications. Chapter 34. The Bupleuron. 1 remedy. I find it stated that the seed of Bupleuron is given for injuries inflicted by serpents, and that the wound is fomented with a decoction of the plant in combination with leaves of the mulberry or of origanum. Chapter 35. The Catanence. 1 observation upon it. The Cemos. 1 observation upon it. The catanence is a Thessalian plant, which it would be a mere loss of time to describe, seeing that it is only used as an ingredient in philters. In order, however, to expose the follies of the magical art, it may not be out of place to remark that this plant has been selected for the above-named purpose, from the fact that, as it withers, it gradually contracts and assumes the shape of the claws of a dead kite. For a similar reason, we shall give no description of the plant called Cemos. Chapter 36. The Calyx. 3 remedies. Of the calyx, there are 2 kinds. One of these resembles arum, and is found growing in ploughed soils, the proper time for gathering it being before it begins to wither. It is employed for the same purposes as arum, and an infusion of the root is taken as a purgative and as an amenagogue. The stalks, boiled with the leaves and some pulse, are curative of tenesmus. Chapter 37. The Calyx, known also as Ancusa or Anoclea. 2 remedies. The other kind of calyx is known by some persons as Ancusa, and by others as Anoclea. The leaves are like those of the lettuce, but longer, and with a downy surface. The root is red, and is employed topically in combination with fine polenta for the cure of erysipelas. Taken internally with white wine, it is good for affections of the liver. Chapter 38. The Serratia. 3 remedies. The Serratia resembles the cultivated Trichnon in appearance. It has a small, swarthy flower, a diminutive seed, like millet, growing in small horn-shaped pods, and a root 1/2 foot in length, generally triple or four-fold, white, odoriferous, and hot in the mouth. It is found growing upon rocks exposed to the sun. An infusion of it is prepared with wine, and administered for pains and affections of the uterus. To make it, 3 ounces of the pounded root should be steeped in 3 sextarii of wine a day and a night. This potion is effectual also for bringing away the afterbirth. The seed of this plant taken in wine or hydromel diminishes the milk in nursing women. Chapter 39. The Surzian. One remedy. The Surzian is a plant consisting of a diminutive and delicate stem, 2 cubits in height, of a triangular form, and covered with prickly leaves. The prickles on the leaves are downy, and the leaves themselves resemble those of Buglossus in shape, but are smaller and of a whitish color. At the summit of the plant there are small purple heads, which fall off in the shape of down. This plant, or the root of it, worn as an amulet, it is said is curative of the pains attendant upon varicose veins. Chapter 40. The Cratiganon. 2 kinds of it. 8 remedies. The Cratiganon is similar to an ear of corn in appearance. It is formed of numerous shoots springing from a single root, and full of joints. It grows in umbrageous localities, and has a seed like that of millet, with a remarkably acrid taste. If a man and woman before the evening meal take 3 oboli of this seed in 3 caiathi of water for 40 days consecutively before the conception of their issue, it will be sure to be of the male sex, they say. There is another Cratiganon, known also as Philigonos, and distinguished from the last mentioned plant by the mildness of the taste. Some persons assert that females, if they take the blossom of this plant in drink, will be sure to conceive before the end of 40 days. These plants, used in combination with honey, are curative of black ulcers of a chronic nature. They also fill the concavities made by fistulous ulcers with new flesh, and restore such parts of the body as are wasted by atrophy. They act as a detergent upon purulent sores, disperse inflammatory tumors, and alleviate gout and all kind of abscess, as those of the mammalae in particular. Under the name of Cratigas or Cratigan, Theophrastus speaks of the tree known in Italy as the Aquifolia. Chapter 41. The Crocodilion. 2 remedies. The crocodilion resembles the black chameleon in shape. The root is long, of an uniform thickness, and possessed of a pungent smell. It is found growing in sandy soils. Taken in drink, it causes a copious discharge of coagulated blood at the nostrils, and in this way, it is said, diminishes the volume of the spleen. Chapter 42. The Cynosorchus or Orchis. 4 remedies. The Cynosorchus, by some called Orchis, has leaves like those of the olive, soft, 3 in number, half a foot in length, and lying upon the ground. The root is bulbous, oblong, and divided into 2 portions, the upper one hard and the lower one soft. These roots are eaten, boiled like bulbs, and are mostly found growing in vineyards. If males eat the upper part, they will be parents of male issue, they say, and females, if they eat the lower part, of female. In Thessaly, the men take the soft portion in goat's milk as an aphrodisiac, and the hard part as an antaphrodisiac. Of these parts, the one effectually neutralizes the action of the other. Chapter 43. The Chrysolachinum. 2 varieties of it. 3 remedies. Coagulum terri. 2 remedies. The Chrysolachinum grows in pine plantations, and is similar to the lettuce in appearance. It heals wounds of the sinews if applied without delay. There is another kind of Chrysolachinum mentioned, with a golden flower and a leaf like that of the cabbage. It is boiled and eaten as a laxative vegetable. This plant, worn as an amulet by a patient suffering from jaundice, provided it be always kept in sight, is a cure for that disease, it is said. I am not certain whether this is all that might be said about the Chrysolachinum, but at all events it is all that I have found respecting it, for it is a very general fault on the part of our more recent herbalists to confine their account of plants to the mere name, with a very meagre description of the peculiar features of the plant, just as though, forsooth, they were universally known. Thus they tell us, for instance, that a plant known as Coagulum terri acts astringently upon the bowels, and that it dispels strangury taken in water or in wine. Chapter 44. The Cucubolus. Strumus or Strychnon. 6 remedies. The leaves of the Cucubolus, they tell us, bruised with vinegar, are curative of the stings of serpents and of scorpions. Some persons call this plant by the name of Strumus, while others give it the Greek name of Strychnon. Its berries are black. The juice of these berries, administered in doses of 1 cyanthus, and 2 Chianthi of honeyed wine is curative of lumbago. An infusion of them with rose oil is used for headache, and they are employed as an application for scrofulous sores. Chapter 45. The Conferva. 2 Remedies. The conferva is peculiar to running streams, those of the alpine regions more particularly, receiving its name from conferumina, to solder together. Properly speaking, it is rather a freshwater sponge than a moss or a plant, being a dense porous mass of filaments. I know an instance where a man who fell to the ground while lopping a tree of considerable height and broke nearly every bone of his body was cured by the agency of this plant. The patient's body was covered all over with conferva, the application being continually sprinkled with water the moment it began to dry, and only removed for the purpose of changing it when the plant gave signs of losing its virtues. It is hardly credible with what rapidity he recovered. Chapter 46. 9. The Coccus conitis, or grain of conitis. 2 Remedies. The Conidian grain has just the color of the kermes berry. It is larger than a peppercorn, and has very heating properties. Hence it is that when used, it is taken in crumb of bread, that it may not burn the throat in passing downwards. It is a sovereign remedy for hemlock, and arrests looseness of the bowels. Chapter 47. The Dipsacos. 2 Remedies. The Dipsacos has leaves like those of the lettuce, with prickly tubercles on the middle of the back. The stem of it, 2 cubits in length, is bristling all over with prickles of a similar nature. The joints of the stem are closely covered with 2 leaves, which form a concave axil, in which a saltish, dew-like liquid collects. At the summit of the stem there are small heads covered with prickles. It grows in watery localities. This plant is used for the cure of chaps of the fundament and of fistula, in which latter case the root is boiled down in wine to the consistency of wax, to allow of its being introduced into the fistula in the form of a salve. It is employed too for the cure of all kinds of warts, as a liniment, for which the juice collected in the axils, as above mentioned, is also used by some. Chapter 48. The Dryopteris. 2 Remedies. The Dryopteris, which resembles fern in appearance, is found growing upon trees. The leaves are of a somewhat sweetish flavor, and marked with slight indentations, and the root is hairy. This plant is possessed of caustic properties, and hence the root is pounded and used as a depilatory. In using it, the skin is rubbed with it till perspiration is excited, the operation being repeated a second and a third time, care being taken not to remove the perspiration. Chapter 49. The Dryophanon. The Dryophanon is a similar plant, with thin stems a cubit in length, and surrounded on either side with leaves about as large as the thumb, and like those of the Oxa myrcene, in appearance only whiter and softer. The blossom is white and similar to that of the elder. The shoots of it are eaten boiled, and the seed is used as a substitute for pepper. Chapter 50. The Elatine. 2 Remedies. The Elatine has leaves like those of the Helxine diminutive, round and hairy. Its branches are small, half a foot in length, 5 or 6 in number, and covered with leaves from the root upwards. It grows in cornfields and has a rough flavor. Hence it is found very useful for deflections of the eyes, the leaves being beaten up and applied with polenta in a linen pledget. A decoction of this plant, with linseed taken in pottage, is good for dysentery. Chapter 51. Empetros, by our people called Calcifraga. 4 Remedies. Empetros, by the people of our country called Calcifraga, grows on mountains near the sea, and is generally found upon rocks. The nearer it grows to the sea, the salter it is, acting as an evacuant of bile and pituitous secretions. That, on the other hand, which grows at a greater distance and more inland, is of a more bitter flavor. It carries off the aqueous humours of the body, being taken for that purpose in broth of some kind, or else hydromel. When old, it loses its strength, but used fresh, either boiled in water or pounded, it acts as a diuretic, and disperses urinary calculi. Authorities who wish full credence to be given to this asserted property assure us that pebbles boiled with it will split asunder. Chapter 52. The Epipactis, or Elaborine. 2 Remedies. The Epipactis, called Elaborine by some, is a diminutive plant with small leaves. Taken in drink, it is extremely useful for diseases of the liver, and as an antidote to poisons. Chapter 53. The Epimedion. 3 Remedies. The Epimedion consists of a stem of moderate size, with 10 or 12 leaves like those of ivy. It never flowers, and has a thin black root, with a powerful smell. It grows in humid soils. This plant also has certain astringent and cooling properties, but females must be on their guard against it. The leaves beaten up in wine prevent the bosom from growing too large in young girls. Chapter 54, the Elephantiasis. 2 remedies. The Elephantiasis has 9 long leaves and is of a caustic nature. It is employed topically, but when used it is wrapped in wool to prevent it from cauterizing further than desirable, for it blisters immediately. For lumbago and sciatica it is of the greatest utility. Chapter 55. 2 varieties of Filix of fern, known to the Greeks as Pteris or Bachchan, and as Pteris or Pteris. 11 remedies. Of fern there are 2 varieties equally destitute of blossom and of seed. The Greeks give the name of Pteris and sometimes Bachchan to the kind in which numerous shoots take their rise from a single root, exceeding 2 cubits even in length, and with a not unpleasant smell. This plant is thought to be the male fern. The other kind is known to the Greeks as Polypodium and sometimes Nymphaeopteris. It has a single stem only, with comparatively few branches, is shorter, softer, and more tufted than the other, and has channeled leaves growing near the root. Swine are fattened upon the roots of either kind. The leaves of both kinds are arranged on either side in the form of wings, whence the Greek name Pteris. The roots are long, run obliquely, and are of a swarthy color, more particularly when dried. When wanted for use, they should be dried in the sun. These plants are found growing everywhere, but in cold soils more particularly. They should be taken up too at the setting of the Virgilii. The root is only used at the end of 3 years, neither before that period nor after. They act as an expellent of intestinal worms, for tapeworm honey is taken with them, but in other cases sweet wine for 3 days. They are both of them extremely detrimental to the stomach, but are laxative to the bowels, carrying off first the bile and then the aqueous humours of the body. When used for tapeworm, it is the best plan to take scammony with them in equal proportions. For rheumatic deflections, the root is taken in doses of 2 oboli in water after a day's abstinence from food, a little honey being taken first. Neither kind must ever be given to females, for in pregnancy they are productive of abortion, and in other cases entail sterility. Powdered fern is sprinkled upon sordid ulcers, as also upon the necks of beasts of burden when chafed. Fern leaves kill bugs, and serpents will never harbour among them. Hence it is a good plan to strew them in places where the presence of those reptiles is suspected. The very smell, too, of burnt fern will put serpents to flight. Medical men have made this distinction as to ferns. That of Macedonia, they say, is the best, and that of Cassiope the next. Chapter 56. Femur bubulum, or ox thigh. The name of femur bubulum is given to a plant which is good for the sinews, applied fresh and beaten up with salt and vinegar. End of section 6.